really good, everybody? This is Nathan Allebach, and welcome to the podcast where we get into people's stories and go down a bunch of rabbit holes about what's really good in the world. So, if you've been keeping up with the show, I've been mentioning lately how I wanted to take a little break from talking about internet culture and social media advertising, explicitly at least, so much. I know it's my job, and it's the reason a lot of you tune in. So, just so you're aware, the next few episodes I'll be putting out, I'll be talking with more local musicians and like small business owners and writers, and I'll probably be jumping back into internet culture-ish specific shows around June. So, just a heads up, I know a lot of you tune in specifically for that content, so I just wanted to make you all aware so you're not mad at me or whatever. I mean, what can I do? If you're gonna be mad at me, you're gonna be mad at me. It's just, this is what it is. So anyway, now for today's episode, I got to sit down with my friend Mighty Joe Castro. Joe is a local artist and musician who's actually made a living with his art. I mean, crazy, right? He does really cool collage work specifically, and like concert flyer commissions and all sorts of really cool stuff. He even published this really beautiful book with his work in it titled Everything We Love is Slowly Becoming Fiction, which he put out, and I got a copy of it. It's really, really phenomenal. He's also put out a bunch of music under a bunch of different projects, and he's got a lot going on. I even recorded a video session for him at our local record store, MaTones Music. Shout out to Adam, which we get into a bit in the beginning here. So yeah, we talked about all his work and how the music and art scenes have changed over the years from his experience. Then we went deep into some classic podcast ramblings, just over like technological integration and the future of our world, and some political shit, like all the good stuff. So yeah, please check out Joe's work in the show notes. He's phenomenal. Like I said, just a great guy. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you all do as well. Oh, and as always, if you enjoyed the show, or even not so much, I guess, I would always appreciate iTunes reviews. So they help the show grow tremendously, and I appreciate the feedback. So yeah, I think that's it. Now let's get into what's really good. Mighty Joe Castro, thanks for coming on the podcast.
You're welcome. It's good to be here.
It's great to
have
you.
It's good to be down here in the brick basement.
Or in the dungeon.
The interrogation room. I have like one bright spotlight shining on me, like ready to answer questions.
Yep, the old jail. Just telling you about it. We're in an old jail in the basement. Who knows what happened here? A lot of history.
This must be like what the WikiLeaks must be feeling right now.
Breaking news.
Same kind of thing.
Oh man. So what made you add Mighty in front of your name? What's the deal with that?
I wish there's like a really cool story about it, but to be honest, years ago I was doing my website and joecastro.com was taken, so I was like I got to put something in front of it. So I've always been like a fan of growing up watching like Mighty Joe Young. Do you know that movie? It's like an old like King Kong, and I watched that when I was little, so it was just like Mighty Joe Young, Mighty Joe Castro with a stick, and like once I did that, it just sort of took off. And even when I introduced myself to people, like, I am Joe Castro. Like, no, you mean Mighty Joe Castro? I'm like, oh, that's a formal term. Like doctor. I don't use it all the time, but so it just kind of came up that way.
It's a good story. I love it. It adds like a nice little flavor. When I saw it on your book, I was like, damn, he's really going for this. This is some good branding. I love it.
Yeah. So I don't know how long ago I did that, like 2002 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And just one of those things that stuck, because you You gotta have a little bit of guts to call yourself mighty. Like, you know what I mean? People are like, "Oh, all right, he must mean business."
I mean, dude, you are mighty. You have a lot of good stuff going for you. There's so much I want to talk about. Like, I don't even know.
Man.
I don't even know how we're gonna cover all of it. I mean, we were just saying before we started here, you're the first guest I've had in a while in person. So this is so nice. Like, I record so many interviews over Skype. I want to say like the past 5 I've done have been online. Like, it's so cool to have local people like yourself. Like, when I first met you, I was like, man, this guy's got so much going on. Like, we met through the record store at MaTones, and I knew you as a musician, I guess, and then discovered you're a designer and you do collages and a lot of really cool commission work. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do it, because it's like it's a local podcast, and I'm always down to support the local community, and to be able to go there and help out and just be involved is awesome, man. I mean, this is great. It's always better to do it in person. This way, if you get in an argument, you could just you can
edit in fisticuffs and not worry, Just kidding.
Way better than doing it with some like person in Hollywood or New York or something like that. They ask you a bunch of bogus questions, and you're just like over the other line, like, what is this person? Like, what?
Yeah. Except you got to wear pants, That's the only difference, I guess. But it's all good.
That's true. Well, dude, I don't know like anything about you on a personal level other than just how we've interacted. So like, let's start.
But that's good. That's why I kind of want to do it.
Yeah, like we can
great,
start at the ground up. We'll work through everything. So I mean, like, where did you grow up?
I was born in New York on Long Island, and then I grew up. I lived there until like I was 8 or 9. Then we moved to Delaware. So I spent most of my formative years down in Glasgow, Delaware, and lived there till I moved to Philadelphia when I was in college. And then after that, lived in, Delaware County, and then just moved around down here to Collegeville area like 3 years ago, something like that.
Okay, cool. So what initially came first for you? Because like I said, I know you're a musician, you're an artist. Like, what did you initially get into when you were growing up?
Probably a little bit of both. Like, music was big in the house. My mom was a huge Elvis fan when she was younger. My dad was a huge rock and roll fan growing up in Brooklyn. He used to go to the Brooklyn Paramount and see all like the old Alan Freed rock and roll shows and stuff. So he would just tell me stories when I was little about seeing Chuck Berry, do the duck walk on stage and Richie Valens and all this stuff. And so those kind of old records were always around. So I always had like an interest in music and art as well. Like, my older brother was really into comic books, and so they were around. And I just found something recently I've totally forgot about, but when I was younger, little, like maybe like 6 or 7, I had a scrapbook, and I was just cutting out like movie posters from like the newspaper and just collecting them like this like photo album. And I was just like, well, that was like probably like my first introduction to graphic design, just because I liked the posters, and so I don't know. To me, it's just sort of something that I've always been into. It's just like music and art have just always been there.
Did you go to school for any of it, or like, what was
I went to school for graphic design.
Okay.
I went to Drexel University and studied graphic design. Music, I never took lessons or anything like that. And I didn't even start playing guitar until later, until like I was like 18 or something like that, like after school. So I guess making art and stuff just came first, but I always just loved music and was just collecting records even like at a young age, like from like, probably like 6 or 7, just saving up money and buying 45s and stuff like that.
You seem like you would have been a punk, maybe? What were you into like at a younger age? Like you're saying like rock and roll and all that. You kind of grew up.
I mean, I grew up in that was in the household when I was little, and then when I hit with like a teenager, the first band I really fell in love with was the Ramones. Okay. Because my older brother had some friends that were into them, and I kind of got turned on to them. And then it was like, this is like, to put it in context, like 1986, 1987. I was into early hip hop a lot because everyone around me was into that, Run DMC,
right.
Public Enemy, Eric B. and Rakim, stuff like that. And then, the Smiths, Echo and the Bunnymen, The Cure, all that sort of the new wave stuff, and then punk and the Clash and the Ramones and Black Flag and the Minutemen and
nice,
just sort of all over the place, man.
So by the time, you said like around 18 or so is when you kind of got into
started playing
music?
Guitar, yeah.
Did you get into like a local music scene, or like what kind of initially thrust you into?
Yeah, like
to
Delaware had and Newark, Delaware specifically had a really robust and intense music scene. Like the local bands there in the early 90s. And, this is like when Seattle was popping off. So all these little scenes were popping off. And down there was just a very diverse music scene. You'd go see a local band and there would be like hundreds of people there to see like original local music. And they would have these all-day weekend festivals where there'd be like 2,000 people there just from the College of University of Delaware. You'd see these people and I got to be friends with them and you were just like, whoa, I want to, like they're doing it, I want to do that, you know? And the bills you'd have like these post-hardcore bands, and then you'd have mixed in with like a dreamy Brit poppy type of band with like a reggae band. There was you just had a wide range of music, so it was really cool. So seeing that was definitely inspiring. It was very a DIY scene, and people were putting on their own shows and putting out their own records, and so
This is something I had a buddy of mine on recently, Brian Medlin, and we talked a lot about like local music scene. I want to say he's 35 now or something like that, and he's been playing in bands since he was like 15 or something, and this is a common thread just going back to like the 90s and the early 2000s where a lot of local musicians, when we talk about this, it's crazy how it seems like the internet kind of devolved local music in a lot of ways, because now everything is online and it's all centralized. So like for someone like if your kids ever want to get into music, all they need is a laptop and they can get into synths and they can upload it to Bandcamp, SoundCloud, or wherever. Whereas like when we were, not even me, I mean, I'm after you, but even when I was growing up in like the early mid 2000s, because there wasn't that centralized nature in like the art community, anytime something was going on the weekend, like a show or whatever, that was the place to be. Like there'd be hundreds of people going just to local shows to support these bands. So it's interesting, like going through, I mean, have you noticed this kind of shift? Like, have you stayed in the music scene over like from the 90s and the early 2000s, or did you phase out? Or like...
No, I've always been around. I've noticed a shift, but I also can't tell if it's just a shift of my perspective with getting older. You know?
You're
so
like, I don't want to commentate on it because I sound like an old guy.
Well, it's like, I think it's different than what, like, I only know what I'm exposed to, so for all I know, there could be some scene somewhere in this town where kids are going to the basement shows.
Well, there's definitely
and
basement
they're seeing
shows.
that kind of stuff, and that's building up, and that's sort of, I don't always get to play those shows, and I would probably feel weird. I don't want to feel like the chaperone guy who's sitting there. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm hopeful that those scenes are still kind of there, but I think it has changed. But I think the culture around music, I think, has changed recently. I was thinking about this, and it's, back in the day, it was like a band could really come out of nowhere and make an impact.
Yeah.
Like a cultural impact, because you only had a few channels. Like everyone was tuned into like only a few television stations, and people still listen to the radio. So if you could get something on the radio, you could make a hit. Like everyone would just the songs would be driven into your skull till everyone heard it, and you would make like a bigger impact. Now it's like it's easier to get your stuff out there, but it's also like just wide open.
There's millions of artists.
Space thing.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can't like. There's so many different outlets, you can't sort of dominate all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Where before it's like if you got a song on the radio and a song on MTV and you were like doing something different, you could really blow up and make like a big cultural statement. Nowadays, I don't know how that's done. I don't know if any of those bands could do that. Like I don't know if you could have like a Nirvana type of situation nowadays. So, and I think that's sort of reflected maybe in the local music scene as well. But I don't know, and it's different too. Like kids can go to rock school now, and it's it's so different. Like kids start doing that, like they're playing soccer, and they're learning cover songs. And I see they're even like I've seen the stuff where they're teaching the kids how to do like the punk rock stage moves and stuff, and how to act on stage.
Right, that's
and
like
kids
a
grow
class.
up like thinking that's what you should do, and really you should just do whatever you want to do. Like that's what the punk thing was supposed to be about. And those shows back that I grew up going to, at least in Delaware, that was the great thing about the music scene, was that it was sort of anything goes, and it was a little bit dangerous, and people were just the slam dancing and the intensity of being like that close to the music and the loudness, the show getting shut down, the cops showing up, all of that, being in there with all those people and the energy and everyone just like waiting for the band. It was people that you knew, or sort of it was just much more intense than going to like a show at a bigger place where there's sort of like a barrier between you and the band. I don't know. Did I answer your question? Or did we go off topic?
There's no questions here. Just bantering. No, totally, man.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like
absolutely.
there's like a different feelings and like some of the best shows I think I ever saw in my life were like those kind of shows because they just impact you in a different way because it's just
creates
more
a memory.
personal.
It creates a memory. Like I remember
sure.
there's one specific show for me growing up. It was probably 2006, I want to say, at the Harleysville YMCA, and it was one of these like it lasted on a Saturday from like a 2 p.m. till into the night type of thing.
Yeah.
There was like 10 acts, like you're saying. There was like punk bands, acoustic, indie, rock, like hardcore. Like it was all these genres. And into the evening, the headliner was this band Bangarang, and they were kind of like these local punk hoodlum types. Like it was just they were known for like really rowdy stage presence. Their audience was really rowdy. It was like a good like intense time, like kind of on the edge.
Yeah.
And they got on. I remember it was like 10 o'clock or something like that, and it was the curfew of the venue. And the people at the YMCA came in. They're like, "You guys got to get out of here! Like we're closing basically." And the band was like, "Well, we're gonna play anyway." And they just basically were like, "F you," and they shut the power off. And it was like in the gymnasium in the YMCA. And they just kept playing. The guy was screaming on stage. He stripped. I remember the police came. It was just this whole fiasco.
Yeah.
And here I am, like that's over 10 years ago, and it's such like a vivid memory in my mind. It was such a fun night where we're all like scattering out in the parking lot, like the police came, and like that. You don't see that type of thing happening as often on a local level. I think I think to your point, kind of like becoming older and like a little bit more detached. I think it definitely. It's there. I'm sure it's in like some rural areas, some suburbs, some cities, but it's not it's more the exception now. I think back then it was the rule. Like that was just how a lot of these local scenes operated. And now so many of the scenes today, there's a lot of DIY stuff going on, but it is in like people's basements and it is way smaller. Like the scale of the types of bands that are all like kind of in the same community, like it's a lot more like niche, you know, and they kind of have like their own little corners of the market, you know, and like it used to just be everybody kind of shared the space because there's still like a barrier to entry. Now there is no barrier to entry, so anyone can do it, and there's just endless scenes.
And I don't know. I can't tell if music means as much to kids now or to like people coming up, you know. Back then there was so little music. And it was hard to get, you know, because you only had whatever records you had or friends copied for you. Like, now you have access to so much. You can get anything and listen to anything at any time. It's like, is it that precious because you have it? If you don't have it, it's like worth more. Do you know what I mean? Like,
totally.
Like, so I don't know if it's like maybe it's being taken for granted or I can't figure out what it is. But I definitely, there is some sort of difference to the, I feel for the intensity that, like, I don't know, you'd wait for an album to come out, and, you know, and you would wait. Sometimes stores would open up at midnight, and you'd wait in line to get it. You get that record. Maybe you saved your money, you got it, you listened to it. That was like your album for the summer sometimes,
right?
Because that's all you could afford. You'd listen to it, you would soak it in and really get like into it, and it was just like
every song.
Yeah, and the songs would mean something to you. Hopefully, and if it did, you know, those things stuck to your guts for the rest of your life. So,
well, even looking back in the past decade, like I can think of waves of like there was like the emo wave of the 2000s, that like that became like a mainstream trend, and then sort of shortly after that there was the indie wave, where you have bands like Bon Iver and like Fleet Foxes and all that going on. But now everything does seem so integrated that there's not really new waves of styles. Like we kind of all like when you look at bands like Mumford & Sons or the Lumineers or these kind of like newer genres and these newer hit bands, like they're all kind of like they combine styles, you know what I mean? Like if they're a folk band at heart, they're now like a folk pop band. Like now they have like beats and like it's more, you know, like everything's kind of combined. Whereas like to your point of like what music meaning something maybe at some point, arbitrary point, like back then, you brought up like Black Flag and the Ramones. Like these are bands that like had very specific social movements and like sort of perspectives and politics attached to the genre and like attached to who they were. Like, do you think there's something to that like that was just like a different time and place for music?
You know what I think too is I think we hit a point. There's a time when every new generation's music was supposed to offend the generation before it. You know what I mean? Or get more aggressive, more intense. Yeah. So if you look at the early rock and roll of the 50s, and then where it got pushed a little bit in the 60s, 70s punk, 80s, you know, you get into like heavy metal. I think everything has been taken at such an extreme. Like there's nothing shocking anymore. Like you can't like the fastest metal music played has like been made. The most darkest, most offensive lyrics have already been said.
We have nothing to rebel against.
You've made music with just turntables where it's just beats where there's not even a human element to it electronically. Like things have been pushed. Like I feel like my generation maybe was like the last generation where we made music that really upset the generation before us. So I remember at the time thinking that, just thinking like the next generation is going to have to like just upset us with boredom or something. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know what else you can do. Like there's a certain like extremeness that I don't know if you can. I mean, you got someone like Gigi Allen or you know, like you've done like everything's like been done. So that might also be the reason like why can't kids do something that's like really have that sort of intensity, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting too watching it kind of cycle back, because thinking back to a lot of those like early 90s, late 80s bands and hip hop and punk and hardcore, a lot of those not all of it obviously, but like a lot of like the messaging, a lot of the lyrics, it was even offensive to some people today. So I think in a lot of ways it's almost swinging back in a way, because now that from like the mid 2000s to now, it does seem like music has become so not sensitized, but like it's pop culture's taken over so much because the music industry kind of died. So now everything is about pop. So it's like no matter what the genre is, you have to like rise to the top of pop. Even in like metal and hardcore, there's like pop music in metal and hardcore scenes. So it's interesting how like kids growing up now that are into like these are the top charts that they heard growing up. This is what they heard on the radio. By the time they are older, when they go back to some of those older bands, I'd imagine a lot of them are not necessarily offended, but like it's like a different connotation now. Like they're hearing certain lyrics and certain things that now you can't really get away with almost. And like if you do that, you're kind of like, I don't know, like not pushed to the shadows, but there's definitely certain acts now that are trying to be edgy, and there's a factor now where back in the 90s you did that and you were kind of the cultural rebels. Now you're kind of like an edgelord. You're kind of like a try hard in some ways. So there's kind of this like weird dynamic there too, where it's like I don't know, like it's like it
is weird, and people are really really ready to call out anyone that they think is offensive or doing anything that's like culturally wrong or insensitive and stuff. And to me, I feel like some of that stuff was there to push your buttons, because if someone's pushing your buttons on what you believe, like I think that's also important, because that should reinforce like your beliefs. It's good to like sort of push people's buttons a little bit. Now everyone's just so worried about being like called out for anything. Like they're very, you know, and that, I don't know. You gotta have. It also has to be a little bit of fun. You have to have some fun in music and rock and roll.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, I don't know, but I don't also want to sound like an old guy, because I know there are great new bands that are out there, because I look at the listing of who's playing at like Union Transfer, and I don't know 90% of the bands on there. You know, I'm just like, okay, like there's something happening,
right?
You know, and I'll hear about bands from people, and I'm like, all right, cool, I'll check them out, and I try to stay up, but there's also so many bands.
Oh, it's insane.
And they come through once, and I never hear about them again. I'm like, what about that? Oh,
the lifespan is so much shorter. That's the other thing too. Like certain bands back then, even just going back as short as like the era of kind of Bon Iver and like the 2010, 2012, where like there was still like that kind of indie boom. Those bands even had, I think, a few good years where a lot of like, I don't know, like that scene in general. Like a lot of those bands, they lasted a few years, but then kind of faded away. Now it seems like a lot of these bands, they come onto the scene, they have like their top chart single or like their hit album, and then by the time next year, newer bands have replaced them, and it's this kind of cycle, and it is bizarre. It's not the case with every band. Like some bands, like City and Color is a great example. I don't know if you listen to Dallas Green. He was the guitarist of how do you say Alexis on Fire or whatever.
Okay, yeah.
But he his solo stuff, I mean, he kind of like he got huge when I was kind of getting into the emo stuff, and he's progressively gotten bigger and bigger each album, and he's been doing it for over 10 years now.
Yeah.
At this point, which is super interesting to me, because it's like, in my mind, I kind of stopped listening to him a few years ago, and I was like, oh, I guess he kind of fell off, and then I go check him out. I saw him a couple years ago, and you know, it's like a sold-out show. Like, everybody's still there to see him. I'm like, okay, like, there's certain styles, certain bands, they can still keep it going. It just it develops like a niche audience, then it stops like expanding necessarily, you know?
I think every artist sort of hits that nowadays. It's like
a plateau.
Yeah, because there's no real support system for a band to sort of make to sort of to work and evolve and fail and then come back. Do you know what I mean? Like 'cause they have to keep making money, and there's no sort of record company advances or no money behind you. So you know, I think for some of these bands, it's like they do it for a while when they're younger. It's like the equivalent of backpacking across Europe. You know, like let's put out an album, let's go tour, and then blah, and then okay, we're gonna get jobs and go into something else or whatever. You know, but going back to the record shop MaTones, that's one thing I was so excited when that opened up in town, because then it's like you have a meeting place you can go and meet other people who are musicians and hear about other music that you don't necessarily, you would, you know, get out of your bubble and see what other people are into. Yeah. Because that was always, I think, an important thing about the record shop. And every time I go in there, I always ask Adam, you know, the owner, like, what's new, what's coming in, what have you got, what have you heard that you've liked? Right. You know, because otherwise nowadays everyone's such in a bubble all the time. You know, I got radio stations, but I don't listen to any like regular radio station. In my car, I got satellite radio, so I'm listening to like very like specific, flipping through like genre stations, and a lot of it's not even that new. And you know, there's not like MTV like back in the day or anything like that. So how do you find new music?
You need an Adam. You need like a sensei to guide
like,
you through,
or friends. You know, and I'm not in high school anymore, so I'm not sitting around like, what are you into, man? This sucks. You know, what do you like?
Because like the older we get, like all our friends have stopped listening to the new music for years,
just, like which is normal, you know. So it's trying to sort of stay in there is like weird, unless you're out there playing shows and you play with other bands, then you sort of, you know. But
even then, though, you just kind of you get phased out. Like I noticed, I stopped playing shows a couple years ago, and in the course of, I think I played out for 7 years or 8 years, something like that. And over the course of doing it, you know, things just naturally phase in and out. Like there was probably 3 or 4 waves I hit where, you know, you kind of go up and up and up, and you're gaining an audience, and there's stuff happening, new bands are coming in. Then suddenly a lot of those people, whether they went off to college or maybe they kind of had started getting married or whatever it might have been, they kind of phase out, and then you get a new audience, and there's like younger kids coming in and new people moving into town, new bands are forming. You meet a new friends group, and you just kind of, I don't know. It's interesting. It's really hard to stay relevant even locally anymore, and that's for me. And that was a large reason why I kind of had to step away from doing it, because I'd put out a couple albums a couple years in a row and watched the kind of scenes change. And I always had support from a lot of my friends, but it's over time you're kind of like, I can't keep up with the waves anymore. Like I'm becoming irrelevant. Like I'm like an old dog in this new scene, and not that means I shouldn't do it. Not that means I shouldn't try. Like obviously you're older than me, and you're still killing it.
An old dog.
you're opening up for Squirrel Nut Zippers at the end of the month. Like you got a lot going on.
But it's funny, like when I think of that. Like lately, we've played a bunch of most local shows, and like man, there's no young people here. Like how do you get the young people to come out to the shows? And I don't know if they are going to shows or what are, you know,
like what are they listening to?
Even when I go out at night, sometimes like where are all the young people? Like, do people go out anymore? Is everyone just home, or like
they all like their secret bars, like their secret spots?
Yeah, you know, which I get it, because you know, when I was younger, I didn't want older people around, you know. I say that to everyone my age. I'm like, look, you're old. No, I'm young. I'm like, no, think of how you looked when you were 20. Right. Like you're the creepy guy hanging out at the young bar. Like, you know, you got to look at it. Like, always keep yourself in that perspective, that young lens. Like you are like, you know, I mean, I'm 45, so I know that like to a 20-year-old or 18-year-old, I look ancient. Yeah, as it should be.
You don't look 45 though. You can get by.
No, people say that to me, and I appreciate that. But in my head, I always want to think that. You know, it's like.
No, it's an interesting point, though.
I haven't got carded in a long time. You know what I mean?
Because I remember being like 18, and most of my friends have always been older than me. So when I was 18, most of my friends were like in their mid-20s-ish. So that was always normal. But like to your point, I've always had to really step back, and because a lot of friends of mine, just through like local church communities and like kind of growing up, they have younger siblings. So like I know a lot of their younger siblings at this point, and I have to constantly remind myself when I'm talking to like their siblings that are like 18 or whatever, that I am old to them, and it's this very bizarre feeling. Yeah, because I don't feel old. I try to talk to them like a normal person, but in their minds they're probably just like this like out of touch loser who's just
That's one of the things with our bands. We wear suits on stage, and that was part of the thing. And we talked about it. I said, I don't want to try to look young. I don't want us, like, if we're in suits, we look like adults, and we're getting up there, we're saying, yeah, we're this age, we're adults, like, we're men, and that's how we're doing it. I don't want to come there because if you see a guy
who's like trying to look
young and look hip, you're just like, it just looks. You're like, come on, man, So now it's like at least you see people see that and they're like, whoa, look at these old guys can like actually still do it and
it's
rock.
stylish,
That's
it's a
cool.
good look. Yeah.
Oh, I love it now because we show up to play with other bands and they all get intimidated the minute you walk in with their suits. Everyone's like, oh, I didn't know you guys were coming. I didn't know you guys were coming dressed up.
Wearing
Really?
like a tank top.
You guys are doing that? I'm like, it's not flip flop night, son. Like,
Dude, tell me, do you follow the Instagram account Rigs of Dad?
No.
I gotta send this to you. It's so good. It's a lot of like older people in band. It's just whoever runs the account, they take pictures of like it's a lot. It's satirical, so a lot of it's like your classic cover band type stuff, and like older people at bars, and it's just the craziest outfits, the craziest instruments. Like it's just really funny things, and then the captions are these long, like sometimes 3-paragraph stories where the guy just like makes up a story, like this is Marv, like he's doing this blah blah blah, and it's fantastic. But I kind of want to get back to your story a little bit before we ramble off too much longer here. I mean, like, so you kind of got into your local music scene during the college years.
So Delawares had just a great scene, and then I started playing guitar, mainly because I didn't think at the time I could sing, and the Smiths were my favorite band, and I knew I couldn't sing like Morrissey, so I wanted to like play guitar like Johnny Marr because he was my favorite guitar player. So I just started trying to figure out how to play that stuff, and then just found friends, formed the band, and all that stuff, and to start playing a ton of shows in Delaware, and it's sort of just been going like that ever since. But I mean, there were just so many good bands in Delaware at the time. Like you ever heard that record label Jade Tree? They kind of were down there, started that time, real big in like the post-hardcore scene, and this band Zen Gorilla, who later moved to San Francisco, got signed to Alternative Tentacles, and Spindrift is another band who's like around still doing it. Like they were all like everyone was just down there doing that, so there was like just a really great scene of bands. And
and I know you played in a lot of those, like a lot of bands. Like, was there like a specific band that kind of broke through the noise that you specifically like attached yourself to, or was there just a bunch of them
that I played with? Yeah, not that I played in, but bands that were down there.
Well, either or. Yeah.
There was a band I loved called Schroeder, who I followed religiously then from Delaware, and they put out like 3 or 4 albums that kind of had like a shoegazy Stone Roses meets like the Monkees kind of vibe, like real poppy and just great songs. A band called Walleye I really loved, that I was friends with, and that band Zen Gorilla, a band called Blacklight Rainbow. When I was younger, those were like the bands that were like just, I mean, there's a lot of those bands I just didn't understand why they didn't get to be huge, because they had intense followings, and like you would play and there would be hundreds of kids just going crazy for them.
That's so
and they
weird.
would get record labels come down there and look at them, and that was a time where they would be like, well, you're not this, you're not that, you got to change your style, and people weren't necessarily doing that, or for other reasons, things just didn't happen.
Yeah.
But
So at the time, like from then to now, have you consistently been like involved in music scenes, or did you kind of take a hiatus? Like
pretty much. There was a time where I did take a hiatus. I was in a band for a while called The Situation, and we were around from I think January 2001 to 2006, and that was probably the one band I was in that had the most sort of success, I would say. Like we did some, we played shows across the U.S. to California. We put out an album and an EP on a label out of Ohio called Elephant Stone, and we played with tons of bands. And we played shows with the Strokes, with opened up for the Libertines, Hot Heat, Nada Surf, Arthur Lee and Love. I mean, we were friends with the guys our singer was really good friends with the guys from Brian Jonestown Massacre.
No way.
And like that whole LA scene, because he moved out there for a while, and he had actually co-wrote a song with Anton and, the guys from the Warlocks and that kind of stuff. And it was like a really intense time. And then when that band broke up and sort of fell apart, I was so burnt out on on things. I took like a few years off and just that's when I started getting heavily into art.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, was there like a transition period into there?
I was getting into art a lot more at that time, and while the band was falling apart, it's hard because the thing is with the band is, like you're one leg of a table, right? And if you're sitting there watching all the other legs on the table not holding up their end, and you're sitting there and you're like, dude, like
Yeah.
this sucks, you know? So after a while, you just want, if it just became easier, like, I want to do something, I could do it by myself and actually have more success because I'm relying on people that aren't necessarily able to do what needs to be done.
Had you been doing art at this point? Because obviously you went to school for it. So like, were you kind of like dabbling over those years?
I had like a full-time job doing graphic design.
Okay.
And for years I used to work at the Please Touch Museum, the Children's Museum in Philadelphia.
No way.
Yeah, and I was their art director for 9 years. And that was like an awesome job. They gave me a lot of flexibility with leaving to do shows and stuff. And it was just a fun, creative job.
Yeah, it sounds
kids.
awesome.
It was awesome. I mean, it was good. And then around the time the band broke up, I quit that to just do freelance graphic design full time and to do art. And yeah, then I was also doing like some video production here and there, music videos. So I was like still involved like in the music scene because I still like loved music, but I was just so, you know, it gets to a point where if you're really in it and you're working hard and you're in a band, and then you start getting a little jaded and you start getting jealous, and then you're going to see other bands playing. You're like, oh, well, so-and-so's opening for them.
Oh, yeah.
That should have been
It's like
us.
you lose the
And then
plot.
You lose the plot.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I think I was at. By the time I left, I was so just frustrated and over it. I was like, this just sucks. So I had to kind of step away a little bit from it and to just sort of get some perspective on it, you know?
Well, I know just from going to MaTones and seeing like you got some prints there, or some commissions there that are framed, and I know you've done a lot of like local not local, but show flyers and stuff from the Philly area. So like, was that your main freelance type of thing? Or were you kind of all over the place?
I was kind of all over the place. Those kind of jobs, those gig posters, they're like good high profile jobs, but they don't pay anything.
Yeah, I was gonna say like there's so many people that want to do them. So it's just like if you're saying, oh, I want like $500 for this or whatever, they'll be like, I can find someone in college.
You're not even getting that. Basically, everyone knows like they're gonna give you maybe something, maybe nothing.
Yeah,
they'll probably pay for the screen printing, and then you'll just print extra ones to sort of sell on the side to make money and say, hey, I did work for this band, or hopefully it's something will come out of that. But you know, it does give you a little bit of clout that could bring other clients into it and stuff. But yeah, most of those contacts came from our band. Was the situation? Our manager worked for. He used to book the Troc and stuff. He was for AEG for a while. Now he's at Live Nation. But through those contacts, he sort of like, you know, I was getting into that, so he threw me some work that way. So I've done posters for shows for like Nick Cave, Pavement, She and Him, Steely Dan, Death Cab for Cutie. And there's a couple more. So
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I would do more, but nothing like that has come up for a while. Because once you say no to a job, then they're just like, okay, and they don't come back.
Right, they can always find some. That's the thing with art, man. It's like there's always these young guns. It's like, we'll just go to the Art Institute. We'll go to like the local schools or whatever, and like they'll find some young, willing person to just...
who has no bills and will just do it for free.
Yeah, we'll do it for the exposure.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
I get into arguments with other artists about that all the time, especially when it comes to how much to price your artwork, because I see a lot of. I'll be in these group shows sometimes, and you'll see people's art, and you know, like let's say I'm selling a piece I did for $900, right? And then next to me is a piece about the same size as other artists did, and he's pricing his for $300 or $250. I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, okay, I know the gallery is taking half that, so it's $150 you're going to make.
Yeah,
I know it costs you $150 to frame it. So what are you going to make off it?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I just want to sell it. I'm like, yeah, but you're like losing money because you put your time in there, your work, and you're making me look like I'm overpriced, you know?
Right.
Yeah, but I just want to get that red dot. Like, and that's good for your ego or whatever, but in the long run, it's like, to me, I'm just like, if you don't want to pay that much, then I don't necessarily want you to have it, you know? Because I can sell you a print. You know what I mean? I can make a print of the artwork and sell that. Like, if you don't want to pay that much, I understand that. But if it's a one-of-a-kind piece, I want someone who's going to be willing to invest that money in it to take it and take care of it. Otherwise, I'll just keep it home and I'll just make money off the prints.
Right. I mean, that's a really interesting topic, I think, that not a lot of people outside of art have to think about because, like you said, even just like the framing, there's so many.
Yeah.
There was an art gallery actually that used to rent from upstairs here. Her name was Sharon Moore. She ended up going out of business. It was really sad. She had to leave. She was like real behind on rent, and it was this whole ordeal. She had to leave a bunch of her paintings behind to kind of like make up for some of it. And the one painting she left behind, I forget who it was by. It's not a famous painter, but it was huge. And the price that she was asking, I think, was like somewhere in the ballpark of like $2,000. I want to say. And looking at it, you'd be like, why is this $2,000? Blah, 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 blah. But even just like when I'd show my friends the frame of it, I'm like, do you know how much just this frame costs?
Yeah.
Like, just like the cost, and not just the frame, but to get it framed, like to have it matted, to actually like professionally go through and like get the glass and everything lined up. I mean, there's a guy around here. He's his name's Merle Moyer. I mean, he's in his 80s, and he has out of his basement. He does that as like a local trade. Like people send him like their commissions or whatever, and he does like a professional mat and frame job. I mean, it's a craft just to do
For
that,
sure.
just that part of it, you know.
Yeah. And you want to get the good high grade, like UV coated glass so it doesn't fade.
Yeah, so it lasts.
And all that stuff just adds on. It's not like going to Michael's and buying like a $20 frame, just sticking the artwork in, which you can do, but then it cheapens it. But I think a lot of artists just have a hard time like finding any value in their work, or they have like a low self-opinion and they don't want to like price it, and they don't want to believe that they could go for that much.
What do you think the root of that is? Is that just like the kind of the classic artists are poor and like they have a hard time making money
I think it's like,
off their work?
It's just like a cultural thing. Like people say to artists all the time, well, like, what do you do? I'm an artist. No, what do you really do?
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Like, it's like not valued. Well, you can't ever make money off art. You can't make a living off art. You can't do that, And, there's also this myth that artists are not supposed to be concerned with money. And that if you are an artist that's like concerned with money, that like that cheapens.
You're selling out.
Well, you're selling out, and that's what you're doing, and you should be poor. And that really, I think, was just created by people who want to buy art for cheap, who are going to later take it and sell it. You know what I mean? Because really the art market on a certain level is just like the stock market. Like it's a commodity, People are buying like, and you see those Basquiat's go for millions of dollars, or the Banksy stuff. You know what I mean? Like people are buying it just to buy it, knowing that it's going to go for more money later. Or maybe they like it, but it's like it's an investment.
It's become an investment. Yep.
Yeah. So whether or not like the artist who created it's not necessarily thinking about that, but that's sort of how it's looked at by everybody else. So people who are going to buy their art want you to think that you shouldn't sell your art. And you just be concerned with what don't be worried about the money. Sell it for cheap, because they're going to scoop it up for cheap and then sell it for more if they can, if you've got what it takes. But I don't know. Like people, it is a weird thing, and I don't think you need to necessarily be greedy about it, but you should have some self-worth and say, yeah, like this is what I feel like I'm worth.
Well, this is something like even so I run that the Steakum Twitter account or whatever, and like in doing that, I get tons of like just random. I imagine it's mostly kids on Twitter. They for free on their own time will create art of like the Steakum thing and send it, and then I'll be like, oh, this is so cool, I'll retweet it. They'll get a bunch of likes and stuff from the retweet, and then they'll message me and be like, oh, like that's so cool, thanks for retweeting this. I'll do a bunch of art for you, like for whatever, like I'll just do it for free. And every time I will message them back and be like, dude, do not just like, and it's a brand account, obviously. I'd be like, never like message a brand account or anyone for that matter and say you're going to work for free. I mean, like your time is valuable. It doesn't matter if you're in high school or you're in college, you're an adult. Like, I think there is something to be said about like people are so inundated today, like especially today with just like content. Like you're on Instagram and you see like there are so many, just countless. You can go through countless suggested pages of Instagram artists that are amazing. And you just keep clicking through and you're like, wow, this photographer is incredible. This painter is incredible. And you just keep going. And I think a lot of people just get so worn down from seeing the stuff so much that they, as artists specifically, like they lose sight of their value. Like even my coworker, Jeff, I talked to him about this a lot over the past couple of years because he's a graphic designer as well. Everyone, he's an amazing designer. So everyone locally is just like always pulling on him, like, Jeff, can you do this for me? Can you design this shirt for me, this poster? And he's had over the years to like really kind of balance his worth, like you're saying, like actually set some standards. Because I mean, there's a point where you can be like, okay, if this is like a really good friend of mine, maybe I'll give you like a friend discount or whatever. Yeah. But it does get to the point where you can easily become exploited for all that time you put into it. You know? So I'd love to hear like more of your thoughts on that, because I think it's an interesting topic that isn't talked about.
Yeah, and I mean, even for friends who ask me to do stuff, or people I know, usually like I'll still charge them something, because I just want to know, like, okay, like just so you understand, you respect my time. Yeah. Because it also wants you to know that what I'm doing has value. Because once you give something away for free, it has no value. And I always find like in the past when I have done free work for someone, like they take advantage of the point where it's like they'll make you do like a million changes, and all of a sudden you're doing more time because they got nothing to lose. They just are going to take you, and like you're doing it for free as a favor. So I'm going to, if you start putting limits and you're paying people, and all of a sudden, like, they have something to sort of risk as well.
Yeah, they're invested in it.
They're invested in it.
Like, they'll be more prepared. Like that's a huge thing with design, too, I know. Like, if they know that you're charging per hour, or if you have, like, a set price in mind, that they're thinking ahead of time now. Like, this is exactly what I want. They're more keen to give direction and have more of an idea and an expectation. Yeah. Whereas if they don't, then they're just going into it like, we'll just go with the flow. We'll figure it out.
Because I have, like, bands reach out to me, occasionally for artwork, collage artwork for their album covers and stuff, and I give them a price, and it's not an outrageous price, I don't think, but I try to keep it low for bands because, but it's still enough to know that, like, hey, like, this is serious. And then, some bands don't want to pay it, and it's like, fine, because I could just make free artwork on my own. I'm doing it anyway. Right. Do you know what I mean? But if you want to do some work together, like, there has to be some sort of, like the money helps. I mean,
it's a transaction.
Transaction, yeah. Yeah. And I got to eat, you got to eat. Like, I'm not asking you to, like, mow my lawn for free or whatever you do for a living, do my accounting. It's just, but it's funny. And I don't know why people have that little value of art, because people say all the time to me, like, oh man, I can't do what you do. I wish I could. I don't have an artistic bone in my body. But then they don't want to pay you for anything. Do you know what I mean? I can't do it, but I don't want to pay for it either. Right. I don't value it. So I don't know. And it's weird because people get so much entertainment now for free, or at least they think that it's for free because they're watching every movie they want to on Netflix. They're not thinking that they're paying a monthly fee for that. Do you know what I mean? So it's not like going to the movie and you're paying. It's like going through tolls nowadays. I always said, years ago, I said to someone, Easy Pass is going to be the worst thing for tolls because you're not giving the money out of your credit card, out of your pocket. Yeah. You're just driving through. Yep. You don't know. And you watch, like, over that 5-10 year time, the tolls like tripled. Yep. And no one's upset about it anymore because you don't realize how much you're paying. You're just coming out of your card. You're just like, another number. You're like, So I think that the idea of people paying for entertainment or art now is like weird. People are like, well, no, it's free everywhere. Yeah. And I mean, I can get it on YouTube or whatever.
Yeah, it's almost like we've lost the mainstream appeal to all this. Like, I think there's a lot more, almost underground comebacks. I mean, this has been a big thing with vinyl the past 10 years, where, like, there's a resurgence in that industry where, like, now bands, like, whereas before bands would print CDs and all that, now bands will, in a lot of cases, just go straight to digital and then a vinyl. It's like invest all their money in the vinyl because it has, like, more of that physical feeling. It feels more individual. It feels more unique, and it feels like you're actually, like, even if you're paying like a premium on it, you're investing in what feels like art. Like, it doesn't. It's not like a CD where you're used to just shuffling a CD and throwing it in your car and you just kind of discard it. You're not really, the plastic isn't like a lasting thing. So there is, I think, and you see this too in, like, local, like, I don't know, have you done, like, the punk rock flea market around here before?
I haven't been down to the one in Phoenixville.
No, I was in the one in Philly.
Oh yeah.
Like the bigger one. That one's great. Sure. But, like, that it's kind of, like, dampened over the years, I'd say. But, like, that scene in general, like, those types of people that they're actively going out of their way to, like, the flea markets and, like, the what do you call, like, the bazaars, like the small town type places to find local clothes, local art, local furniture, whatever it might be. So there's definitely a resurgence on some level for that,
Yeah.
but it's not. I don't think it's ever going to come back to the mainstream because, like you said, we got Netflix, we got Spotify, like we have all these mediums that are just for like kids that grow up with it. Like you grew up going on YouTube. There's ads, but it's not like like it's not like when we were growing up. Like even like TV. Back in the day compared to YouTube now, it's like there was still this separation there where you understood what was going on, and like now the screen and the internet, it's all kind of integrated into our lives.
Yeah.
So that there's that feeling like we're desensitized to what it is, you know. So it's a lot more. I think it's a lot more difficult to press the idea. Like even this, like I've got your book right here in front of me. It's like this physical book in my hand. Like when I'm scrolling through it. It's such a cool feeling to look at the pictures and to like actually absorb the art. But like I get that every day on my Instagram too. Right. So I have to kind of like when I hold the book, I'm like, oh yeah, this is what it feels like to actually absorb art, because on the phone I've lost that feeling. I'm just like, oh, cool picture, scroll.
Yeah,
you know
it's like 30 frames per second. It's like a moving image. Instagram, we just like, you know, and it's funny because, you know, that's why people do the Throwback Thursday thing. You're like, you'll put something up again, and I'll get people like, oh, is this new? I really like this one. It's like, no, you commented on it last time, but you don't remember.
You just scrolled so quick.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason I want to do the book too, is just to have something that people can actually take a little bit of time with, you know, because you'll look at a book different. Then, also the thing about, I always feel like the thing about doing books and about doing records is like when you have it out there, people look at you differently. Then it's like, oh, like you're serious.
You did something.
You know what I mean? Like you really like. I have so many people said to me, oh, like you're serious about this. You're really doing it. And I'm like, yeah, because anyone can, like, nowadays with recording music, you can record an album in your room with GarageBand, whatever, and throw it up on Bandcamp, and you can get like however many listens and make no money, or maybe make a little bit of money of it, and you're invested nothing into it. Yeah. But if you're going out to like, you're pressing vinyl, you know, you're spending like a couple grand or at least, you know, depending how many you're pressing. And you have that, you know, to have that document, get it out there. It's like people are like, oh, well, you're serious. You know, you've got money in the game now. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. And that sort of was the reason about doing the book too. I just wanted to have something out there and just, you know, I think for me too, it's also coming from that punk ethic and that DIY thing of like, you know, putting out your own records, putting out your own book. Mm-hmm. Like to see someone like Henry Rollins have his own book label for years and put out his work and other authors' books, and then put, you know, like, I don't know if I would have done this without seeing, he was just like, I wanted to put out my own books. I didn't want anyone else to edit them. I didn't want to waste any time, so I just did it. And it's like, and now it's so easy because the printing costs have come down so much. Right. So this came up, I got a good deal. I started seeing all the printing price come down. I'm like, you know, I could actually do this affordably and make my money back. Yeah. And hopefully make a little extra money if I price it right. So, I mean, there's a lot of options. Right. For that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So, like, this book specifically, we can kind of get into a little bit here. I mean, it's obviously straight in the title. It's everything we love is slowly becoming fiction, and it's a lot of your selected collage works. I mean, like, what... Just kind of go back initially a little bit to kind of get into this. Like, what initially kind of led you into doing collages specifically?
Yeah, like the book focuses on the years from 2007 to 2017. I started doing collage work a bit before that, probably like around maybe like 2002. Mm-hmm. But in 2007 is when I feel like I started doing work that was like my style, that was different from what other people were doing. Like I feel like I had like a sort of a stylistic breakthrough. But I'd gotten a book on collage at Borders Books and Music one day, and I was just like, oh, this is cool. And, you know, coming from like a graphic design background and also being a guy who loves to go to flea markets and buy old magazines and being obsessed with old Life magazines and reading the articles and looking at all the stuff in there. And it was like, well, cool, this is something to do with all these magazines I have later on. So I just started playing around with it, and I wasn't really that into it. And then I saw two things. I saw this movie on the artist Ray Johnson called How to Draw a Bunny, and he was like a famous pop/collage artist from the 60s, and which was awesome. That was a big influence. Then I saw work by a New York artist named Dash Snow that came in this design, and he did these collages that were all of a sudden like not like cute little... his stuff just had like a much more of a rawness and an impact to it when I saw it, and I was like, whoa, this is like heavy art. It's really raw, and my style doesn't look like that at all, but it just clicked in my head like, oh, well, this isn't just arts and craft time. Mm-hmm. You know, you could like do something and sort of make a statement with it. So those were the two things. And I was doing a lot of painting at the time, oil paintings and portraits, and I had a a show in 2007, and I didn't have enough work to fill it up. And I was like, man, this thing's opening in like 2 weeks. I gotta find something. So I was like, I'll make some collages.
Just throw some collages. Yeah,
and I remember it was like
great.
it was like a Thanksgiving weekend, and everyone was out of town. And I just locked myself in a room for like 2 days with like a pizza and a lot of coffee, and just sat there and like created this work in like this whirlwind. I just remember looking at it and just being like, whoa, like this all looks different, and I really like it. And all those pieces sold.
Wow.
And
No
all
way.
of a sudden, like the whole thing's, all the collages sold.
What a sign.
I went there to get my work, and I'm like, where are the collages? I want them. And they're like, they're sold. I'm like, no, well, I should have priced them more. I didn't expect anyone to even be into it, you know? And so from that, it was just like, I started doing more of it, and I got a good response, and then I just sort of got hooked. And that was, that was before Instagram, and I didn't really know of any sort of other collage artists that were doing work. I hadn't really seen anything. It wasn't until later I started putting stuff on like Facebook and Flickr, like in 2008 or something, 2009. And then I started like finding, just trying to find
fellow
more
artists.
Just finding more outlets to get my stuff out there into like, different blogs and magazines and stuff like that, and just sort of building up. I mean, now it's like in the last 10, there's so much collage art out there, and it's really sort of blown up. And, I always say, I think the reason for that is because it's really the easiest medium to do.
You think so?
Well, I think it's tricky because it's like, in my mind, it's like the blues. Like, it's easy to play 12-bar blues, but it's hard to do it with style.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
Or originality. Like, anyone could take a magazine, you got glue, you got scissors. Like, my kids make collages,
Yeah.
But to do it with originality and do something different and with put your own spin on it, and to do it well is... Like, just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you at some point. Like, what do you think makes your style, or I should say made your style, stand out in a way?
I think, like, at least when I was coming up, I didn't see many people doing, like, stuff that didn't, like, have, like a background. Do you know what I mean? Like, my pieces are, like, these collages that are on this sort of open field of a muted color.
Interesting.
Usually everything else was like boxed in. There was like a background texture. It was more framed, Where I think these collages are almost like portraits, Like there's like this image and the background is just sort of blank.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a lot of people doing that stuff back then. It was more like everything was sort of like in the square. It was nothing like open. And it just sort of started that way because when I would make the collages, I would just have I usually have these big sheets of paper, and I work on the floor. And the final size is determined like whenever it's done. Then will trim them down, so I'm not confined to size, and because I don't like working like an 8.5 by 11 square. They're usually like a decent size, but that was the one thing I noticed. Is like, wow, no one else is doing it like this. Like there was a book I was in, and you could see there's a book that came out called The Age of Collage, and it was published by a well-known art publisher in Germany. And you could get it in bookstores now still. It's still printed. And it was like sort of like I was included in that. And if you go through that, I remember looking through that book, and it came out in maybe it was 2011 or 12, and just going through like, nothing else looks like mine in here. Like I was very, and it was sort of had like all the, like what people consider to be some of the bigger artists at the time. So yeah, I think that was like the only difference is like, it was just, my collages are all sort of floating generally, like nothing ever touches the edges, and everyone else's did or were just different,
Right. No, I love it, dude. Like just going through the pages. I mean, obviously you cover a lot of different topic material. I mean, you do a lot of different stuff, but is there like a specific, I don't know how to word it, like subject matter or messaging that you try to like center around, or do you draw inspiration from?
I don't know if there's like an overall one. I think there's different themes that
I should say like a favorite. Do you have like a favorite in there?
A favorite collage?
No,
Or
like a favorite,
theme that sort of
like a theme or a subject matter. It's hard to I don't know word what it would be.
Yeah, there's a couple things that creep up, and sometimes it's interesting. You don't really know what it is until later. Like
right.
With the collages, sometimes if I'm doing a commission for someone, then you sort of know where you want the end product to go. Sometimes you're just sitting there working and you're cutting out images and you're not really thinking about it, and you start putting it together.
Yeah, it's like writing a song.
Right. And then all of a sudden, like you're halfway, it's a lot. I say a lot. It's a lot like writing a song. And then you're about halfway there, and all of a sudden, like you start realizing what you're saying, and then you finish it, and you're you're almost like, I didn't realize I felt that way.
Yeah.
You know, like you
it's
learn
connecting
a lot,
those
you learn
pieces
a
for
lot
you.
about yourself, and all of a sudden, like I'll look back at pieces and I can relate them to what different things that were going on in my life, and I'm like, oh wow, like there's something from the subconscious sort of coming out, you know. So I don't know. I've seen a lot of stuff in there that sort of deals with like the influence of technology versus like humans, and sort of desensitizing people to other people. You know, the passing of time, a lot of stuff in there about politics.
I was gonna say, like, you seem like there's kind of like these political subversive elements involved.
Well, you know, it's funny. Like, the great thing about doing art, there's a little bit of politics in it. It's like someone can't argue it with you. Do you know what I mean? Like, you put it up there, and you can either take it for what it is, interpret it whatever way you want, you know. But it's like, boom, that's the statement. Like, what are you gonna do? Send me your piece, and we're gonna argue about it. It's not like putting up a meme where it's like a meme war. What are you gonna say to this collage? Like, come on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Because hopefully it'll make you feel something in a visceral or in some sort of way, or make you think or feel an emotion. But you can't, like, it's a hard thing to argue with a piece of art, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't like to get preachy with it and say, you know, because sometimes I'm not even sure how I feel about certain things, or it changes, because you have to sort of question everything and question yourself.
People change,
and evolve,
course, yeah.
right? And but you know, I always liked the power of art, like Picasso's Guernica, you know. And I read like a book about the whole story about that, and the town that got bombed during the war and the massacre that happened there, why he created it, and just being like floored by that, just being like, wow, like there's a power in that. So, you know, once in a while, like I've tried to put that stuff out. You know, people generally respond positively to it, but no one's ever called me out and been like, you're an asshole, you know, or something. Or once in a while, there's been a couple times where people are just like, why is your art so political? But no one really ever says anything.
Well, to your point, it kind of it sounds like a lot of that has to do with tact, like how you approach it, how it's kind of entwined with the art itself. Like if you're just being, because to a point, that's what makes art. I mean, like if you're just like, say you're just writing a Facebook status, or you're just in your art piece is literally just like propaganda, like it's a political cartoon. Like you're not being subtle at that point, but like with what you're doing, there's a lot more nuance, and it's a lot less in your face, like, you know, just shoving this propaganda. It's like really like you have to think about it, you know.
And I feel like with a lot of mine too, it's not trying to get across like a political ideology, but it's more about like, look, this is how people are being affected on like a personal level. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And sort of because I'm not trying to push anyone else's ideology on anybody, but it's like, hey, this is what's going on, and like this is how it's affecting, like sort of on the ground level. But
how important is that, do you think, for artists just in general, like to have that kind of that subversive element to being able to speak to life and politics and reality just through your art?
I definitely think it's important if that's what moves you as a person. And I mean, there have been plenty of artists, both visually and musically, that influenced me, that I learned a ton from. Like growing up listening to Public Enemy records, and KRS-One, I learned so much about.
You're learning about politics
and the world. And even now I listen to that stuff, or like The Clash and Billy Bragg and these guys that really like, you know, you get you thinking like a certain way and questioning things and doing more research, whether you agree with everything they say or not, you know. And like the problem with politics nowadays is that everyone is just listening to their own talk box. Right. And for all this talk about people talking politics on Facebook, all they're really doing is they're not talking politics, they're parroting. Yeah. And they're just copying and pasting what someone else said, putting it on there and being like, I was saying to someone the other day, the politics is treated like sports now. Everyone's just rooting for their team, right? Yeah. But the problem is, what people don't understand is, like, you're not the person in the stand. You're the field. You're the grass getting trampled on. You know what I mean? So you're not, like, on the winning or losing side. Like, the average person is, like, you're getting stomped on by both teams. Like, you need to, like, get up, you know.
That's the punk in you.
Yeah. You know, you need to question everyone and just sort of, you know. You can't like just buy into one totally, like in the one side.
Well, I think it's so important too. I like how you pointed out just the idea that you got that sort of political influence, you know, whether it was overt or subvertly, from listening to music like that. I talk about this so much with my friends because a lot of people I know, like you said, everybody's kind of political these days. Yeah. And I talk to a lot of friends in real life about just like
the news and what's going on in the world of politics. And something I always point out is just how, or at least I try to point out, is how culture itself affects our politics way more than our actual politics. Like,
Sure, yeah.
like even just regarding shows like SNL or The Daily Show, like these types of shows, there's so many people I talk to who they love these shows and that they'll fight to the death with me like, no, dude, it's just a comedy show. And I'm like, dude, those aren't comedy shows. They're news shows. Like they literally, like they can. And I remember like back in the day with Jon Stewart specifically, he would get in like these debates with Fox News panelists and be like, "I'm a satirist. I'm a satirist," and I get it. Like I know there's more nuance to it there, but you're not just espousing ideas politically, but you are like the main source that people are deriving their ideology from, because like you, generally speaking, like growing up, and you and I both know this, like you first obviously get your first taste of politics through your family, like your family and your community, and like whether you go to church or school, whatever. And then as you get older, you get it from your music, you get it from art, you get it from the stuff you see online, from like the sort of projections of culture, like the movies we watch, the TV shows. And I just think people today specifically don't think about how much television and how much movies and how much just all these different mediums play into politics. And I think it's funny because like I don't, by any stretch, I mean, I come from a pretty conservative family. Like I don't identify conservatively anymore at all, but like I really just, I think from having friends in that space, like I talk to them pretty consistently. I think this is one of the best points that conservatives often bring up, is because conservatives are kind of just as a whole kind of left out of the mainstream, like the establishment media a bit. Like it's not as like in polite society to bring up like Huffington Post versus Drudge Report on the right. Like you're much more likely to see Huff Post shared on like Facebook and everybody's going to react positively to it than Drudge Report. And that works all the way from Fox News to MSNBC, whatever. But it's interesting because I think that's one of the biggest criticisms that the right has of the left, where like the left as a whole, not, and this is just broadly speaking, I know there's many different sects of the left, from like leftism to liberals, but just generally speaking, like liberal mainstream is very veered toward that political ideology. So it's interesting just how I think there's like that knack that we have growing up, like, because I grew up watching shows like The Daily Show and reading certain publications like Huffington Post or whatever, and like I didn't really think about the political implications till I got older, and then start to question things and be like, oh yeah, like obviously these are corporations and they're companies with biases, with people with biases, and they're not, when they make this joke, the joke isn't, it's not without a punch. It's not without consequences. Like those ideas are getting into my brain, and we have to think about that. And that is something I don't think a lot of people think about. And
it's hard too, because I think like some of those comedy shows, I mean, that's the problem you hear people on the right complaining, is that they make so much fun of the other side that eventually they feel like they're getting picked on, whether it's wrong or right. And you know, I with politics, I feel like there's not a discussion anymore. People just shout, and especially on Facebook, there's no one discussing ideas. People are shouting back and forth, and like you're never going to convince anyone that your idea is right by calling them a dickhead. You know what I mean?
That's how you start it.
It's like people always do that. It's like you're this, and everyone wants to put you in this box, you know. And you're never gonna. I think you need to change people's minds to do right. And if someone doesn't agree with what you're saying, like you need to find a way to convince them. You can't just yell it into them. And I think that's the thing that people forget. And I think people also need to realize, like, it's a big country, and people in different parts of the country are dealing with different things around them,
problems,
and different socially, culturally, whatever. You need to sort of be aware of both sides need to be aware of the other side and be like, hey, look, you pay taxes, I pay taxes, we're both contributing. We need to figure out a way to sort of meet in the middle and make this work. But, you know, when it comes to the news channels and stuff and ratings, like they don't care. They just want to get there. It's just down to sports again.
Yeah, I mean, the division is what drives sales.
Drives sales. And like you need to realize, like, you're either a pawn in that game and you're going to buy into it, or you need to step away. I mean, I'll go to the Y to the gym sometimes, and they'll have CNN on one side, Fox News on the other side. And I'll switch between both to hear the story and the way both stories are
it's
spun.
Like different universes.
And I know which way, like I have a bias toward one of those two ways, and I'll steer that way, but I'll make sure I listen to the other side too, just to sort of, because you got to know how the other side's thinking too, because you want to sort of
Totally.
get a whole picture, you know. But
Well, I think I had a guy recently on that I was talking to, and he described the world of the emergence of social media like we're all now forced into the same room, which I thought was an interesting way of putting it. Only in the sense that like before social media, yeah, like you could say that we all maybe got along a little better, we communicated a little better. Same time though, I think part of the problem was that we didn't often communicate just how severe our differences were.
Sure.
Because we didn't have the, like, if you and I would have been hanging out, like watching a football game or going to the park or whatever we'd be doing, we might, touch on some political issues there, but we're not going to like go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And we weren't exposed to all, like you mentioned, all across the country, you have people with different problems. Now suddenly, like, we're exposed to everybody's problems at the same time, and we're hearing people's opinions for the first time. Like, there's certain opinions, like this is the classic thing with family members. Like, we all had situations where we see like our uncle or some cousin post something, we're like, I never knew they believed that, because you never had that conversation. So it's like, we're also kind of like, I call it we're the internet babies. Like, we're just kind of like trotting through this like weird beginnings phase of learning how to communicate our ideas better, because we're bad at it.
And people are more, and on the internet, people are more aggressive of what they say because there's not as much consequence.
Right.
Like, you could, like, the stuff I see people say online, I'm just like, dude, there's no way you'd say that to someone's face. You know, because
every day,
either that you would feel like you would have some sort of gut reaction about like how they, you see how the other person reacts on their. Everything just gets blown out of proportion, you know. Like,
well, we talked about this before we even started recording, just with Skype interviews.
Yeah,
and it's like there's so many things you say over Skype. That's the biggest problem with those interviews. Is like they're not in the room.
Yeah,
so
like you would never say that if we were in the room. You know what I mean? Because you just wouldn't, because there could be consequences, like physical consequences, right? There's something to be said for that. And when you're putting stuff online, what you type, the way it gets taken depends so much on the attitude of the reader. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, you can write a regular line. Someone's in a bad mood, reads it, or thinks you're feeling some way about something, will just take that and manipulate that sentence and know this is what it means, and this is how you're attacking me. And you're like, dude, I didn't mean that at all. You know, and everyone's, people are afraid to get out there. Like, that's one reason why I really wanted to get out and start playing shows live again, was, I work from home. I'm in my own little bubble in my house. I wanted to get out there and mix it up with people.
Yeah, meet people. Yeah.
Meet people, get in their face, like, bring people out, like, hey, man, like, it's not that scary out there. Like, leave your house and travel and go meet someone who doesn't believe the same thing as you do. Mm-hmm. Maybe you'll learn something. Maybe they'll learn something. Maybe you'll learn you're not really that much different. But, like, just get out there and travel. Like, I went to this Collage festival last year in New Orleans. And I was down there for a week. And I took the train down. I took the Amtrak from Philly to there. It's like a 30-hour trip and stuff. And people are like, well, why are you doing that? You're going to take the train through Mississippi and, all these states, and, you're going down there.
It's crazy.
These people are going to be hard. Because I want to get out there and see what they're experiencing and, like, talk to people, and talk to people that are different from me, because that's part of the thing about traveling, I think a lot of these people that have these really sort of set in stone ideas of how things are, they don't travel and get out there and meet people.
Yeah.
Like, once you go out there, and it's like, especially I think traveling in foreign countries is so valuable, because once you're at the mercy of someone else where they can't understand what you're saying, and you're in their country and you're sort of at their sort of the mercy of their kindness because you're handicapped, right? You come back and you have a different attitude toward people who are the same way in your country.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? You're not sitting there like saying, come on, man, speak the language. Because you go there and you're like, hey, I have sympathy because I've been in that situation.
Yeah.
Because how many Americans can speak more than one language?
Right.
You go to Europeans,
it's like the lowest of all the developed countries.
Right. So, you need to put yourself sometimes in a vulnerable situation to give yourself the empathy toward other people,
Yeah.
So that's one reason why I like going to even the art openings and going traveling for shows and stuff like that. It's just get out there and just, because it's a big world out there, man. It's good to meet people face to face. Like, that's why I said, like, it's better to talk face to face. It's like a whole different it's a whole different thing, you know?
Yeah, it's so much more human. I think too, it's just I talk about this a lot as well, just the cultural divide between rural areas and city areas.
Yeah.
And we're kind of in this lucky both of us kind of grew up in this lucky sweet spot in between the suburbs and the cities where there's like, you kind of get a mix of both worlds. Like that you could drive from where we are right now 10 minutes and you'd be in the sticks pretty much. And it's just people living in trailers in the middle of the woods or in a mountain, and you could go 20 minutes the other way and it's just virtually a city. And you get a good mix around here, but still I think that cultural divide is huge, especially just looking at social media. I mean, like people more so than ever because so many industries have been abandoned in this country. Like people are flocking to the cities for work, and then the cities have a very distinct culture to them, which is so vast. It's like another universe to the rural areas and that culture. And I think that is such a huge. It's so important. Like it's just so important that like people at least attempt. Like I think it's a big thing with comedians and musicians that just tour around the country and they're able to like perform in front of different audiences, and you kind of get a feel for where different people in different cities and different ideologies are coming from, and it's such a. It is such an important thing, and I think for my work, when you're saying you work from home, like I don't work from home, but I do sometimes. Like it's kind of half and half for me, and like my life is on the computer pretty much. Like my life is online, and I lose that all the time. Like I was saying before we started, you're like the first person in like 5 podcasts I've done that was in person, and like I even like getting started this, I was like, man, it's like a weird feeling. Like it's just like a different feeling to have someone in front of me and actually being forced in a long form setting to converse. And like when you're doing this online constantly, it's just a very that wall is just up. I mean, even over Skype, there's a wall up, and like you act different. Your reactions are going to be different.
People are distracted more. It's like it's totally different. And I think now so much of what's given to us is just fear based. You know what I mean? I always say you never trust someone that's trying to sell you with something in fear. I mean, you can't turn on the Weather Channel without being hit with like fear of everything.
Everything's going wrong.
Day. Yeah. I get updates. Rain. It's going to start drizzling at 2:32 p.m. Why are you even telling me that? It could be the most sunniest, beautiful day out, and you will look at the weather and be like, beautiful day, 72. Skin cancer warning. Fear skin cancer. Even on a perfect day, if it's raining, there's like there's chance something. Of a thunderstorm.
Yeah, there's something.
Everything is like because they need you glued. They want you to come back to that app because what's going to draw you back to watching the Weather Channel is fear. Yeah, and it's the same thing with TV and with politics. They just want you to fear. These people are coming for your jobs. This guy's coming for your guns. These people are going to come and rob you in your community. I mean, I see it in my neighborhood all the time. People are like. They're getting dogs like they want to start buying guns. We got to load up, like generators in case things go down.
Yeah, like the apocalypse or like the preppers or whatever.
Yeah, I'm looking at it and I'm like, how many rounds of ammunition are you going to have? Because if shit really goes down, like if stuff really goes down and you're the only one in the neighborhood with a bunker and you've got food and you've got generator.
People are coming for you first.
Like you better have a lot of rounds because people are going to get desperate and that's when it's going to get real.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like you have to sort of have like a realistic perspective on it. If it does come down and civilization falls apart, you better be more willing to work with other people than to just sort of hole up in a hole because nothing's going to come out of that. You can look at any natural disaster. It's like it's only when people come together and pull together that things work out.
Yeah. I think there's something to be said, too, about just the fear narrative specifically and how maybe in years or generations past, there was sort of like a mainstream establishment narrative, whatever you want to call it, in media and academia and all that. And people that were just kind of going through life, you just kind of watched the news and you listened to your favorite radio stations, your favorite movies, and your experience. I mean, obviously not everybody's experience is the same, but like as a general like rule in past generations, like you kind of like you had this really basic narrative of the world, no matter where you were, and whether it was like a little bit harder, a little bit easier, but in those generations, you had those subcultures of like punk and counterculture and all these different things that were kind of reacting to the mainstream, because obviously throughout that time there were major issues going on that needed to be pointed out. So like the counterculture type movements would point out like, hey, we should be worrying about this, we should focus on this, we should be afraid of this.
Right.
But now that everything is like a 24/7 like integrated system, that fear and that like you said, like the kind of driving of divisiveness is just, it's become the currency of what life is now. So like all these like news organizations and even a lot of schools and a lot of what do you call it? Just general media as a whole. Like it's driven by division, and it's driven by like keeping people's heart rates going, like keeping our adrenaline going. So then it becomes really hard for normal people to subvert it, because it's like, how do you subvert it? It's like you can't say to not be afraid, because there are issues.
Yeah, sure.
So like you're like, your ability to even counteract the mainstream narrative is really diminished, because it's constantly weighing people down and making people feel a certain way. So then in a lot of cases, those people just kind of drift away. Like maybe they stop watching the news altogether.
Yeah.
Maybe they just stay in their little bubble of watching sports, or maybe they leave social media and they kind of like abandon the public square. And like that's like the biggest, I think, scary thing about where we're at now, is just the disenfranchisement of people with the whole thing. Like people are just so fed up with the whole thing, and no one's really engaging. And like the people that are engaging, that are kind of perpetuating the madness, they're trapped in that system. But most people are kind of like backing off of it. Like I don't want to be part of that.
I think too. And I was thinking about this, like when that change happened, I think once they came out with like 24-hour news stations like CNN, then you need to talk about something for 24 hours. And you watch those shows, there's no news on there.
It's all O.J. Simpson's fault.
It's pretty much. It's all opinion. They'll say, here's the breaking news, and you'll spend an hour and a half of just panels talking about it.
Yeah, as it's unfolding.
There's only one piece of news in there. Everything else is just speculation and talk about it. You know, and I think that's just like a real problem. But one thing about going back to the collage stuff that's interesting is I enjoy going, like people have said to me recently, like, this is the worst time in the history of the world. Everything's horrible. In our country, it's the worst. But when you start going through these old magazines, you see that nothing really changes. And the time is like totally cyclical. And I mean, I'll pick up a magazine from the 60s and you'll flip through it and be like, the environment is in trouble. China's the new economy. There's war in the Middle East.
The riots.
There's riots. There's probably racism. The liberals are doing this. The right wing is doing this. And so when you start seeing that context, even when you look at, I've had a bunch of issues around the Watergate time, and it's cool to look at articles when you see the pieces were written as they were happening at the present time. Now you look back in hindsight and you think like, okay, everyone knew he did it, and it's like this cut and dry thing or whatever. But back then it was like people were saying
conspiracy.
It's fake news. It's this, that, and so it gives you a perspective. Like, I mean, I think it's gonna be really fascinating to see how things are looked at 20 years from now, you know, when people look back on this time and what they take on it. But you know, you have to get like a little bit of perspective. But everyone just has that fear driven into it. It's like you can't be driven by fear. It just constrains everything, you know.
And it's like a magnifying glass. Like we're under, like you said, 24-hour news. Like once that started and the internet started, like now it's not just newspapers and like your 3 news channels and your radio anymore. Now it's just, you can't turn a corner without there being a million podcasts, a million radio shows, a million television shows, a million YouTube channels. Like there's so much.
Everyone's obsessive about it, and it's even on the like you said, even the TV shows you watch, the politics stuff seeps into that. You know what I mean? And it's all commentary, and there's something good to be said about that in certain ways, but then there's also like there's no escape from it. You know, and I don't know. I just keep telling people like, man, you can't be scared. Like, well, I'm not scared. No, you're trust me, you're scared. Like you're sitting at home alone with like a gun, waiting for someone to come in the house. Like you're
on edge.
You're on edge, man. Like just relax. Most people aren't that bad. And not everyone is like trying to kill you.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Like meet a stranger and like make a conversation. You know, it's like some good can come of that. Not everyone's a serial killer out there. You know?
That's like murder mystery podcasts. They're like the number one podcast genre.
Yeah,
it's like it's getting people freaking out about
with
murder.
That. Everyone's right. Like, you know how rare that is.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like
my wife's obsessed with those podcasts, and it's so funny. Like we lock our doors and all like the normal house stuff, but it's so funny how like it's ramped up for her. Like we talk about it, but and to her, like she's not here to talk about it obviously, but her and I have gotten into this, and like and for her, she calls it it's more cathartic for her because she's as a woman, like she's always been kind of afraid, you know, like even just walking home from work, walking to your car, that type of thing.
I get that. I can understand that.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. So like for her, it's been interesting. I think as she's kind of listened to a lot of these shows over the years, it's really like it's solidarity. You know what I mean? It's like well now we're able to hear all these people's stories and kind of process it in a funny, entertaining style way, which is good. That's the cool thing about this shows. But it's very indicative of the times that this is a very popular thing that we talk about. But how do you communicate this stuff with like your kids? Do your kids talk to you about like just like life at large? Are they at that age?
Yeah, they are a little bit. Like my oldest is going to be 9 soon, so there's things come up with stuff that they hear their other friends say and what they're dealing with.
Yeah,
and, I try to just be as honest with them as possible. And they don't have phones. We limit screen time with them.
That's good.
Like they're not on the computer without us being there. We don't even have the TV on most time in the house. We do maybe movie nights once a week.
That's nice. Keep it special.
And we get and then it's like special and like go outside and play. And my whole thing with kids and with people is I think the problem is that there's a real lack of boredom. And so for my kids, I'm like, hey,
it's so true.
Kids are like, I'm bored, and I'm like, yeah, it's awesome. Now go do something really cool because of that. And I think that also goes back to part of the problem with the music scene. It's like creating good music and getting those things was to combat boredom. There was nothing else to do, So going to a local show and being involved in that was what you were doing. Now we're so bogged down with distractions. People are distracted constantly, and that's really it's hard to get things done. Like great things, invention comes out of boredom. Like I was thinking the other day, take the game of golf, like. At the base level, and I'm not trying to disrespect golf. I got no problem with the game. But if you look at it, it's kind of a stupid game. Like, you got a ball. Someone's like, yo, I got the stick and this ball. Like, it started with just some dude sitting around drinking going, yo, I bet you can hit that ball in that hole over there. Go for it with a stick. I bet you I can. How many... I did it in four shots. Well, I did it in 3. And then, I'm talking like
the origins of golf.
Hundreds of years ago, and then it builds up. But it's from people being bored.
Yeah.
Like, no one just sat there and was like, you know what I mean? Like,
totally.
It just came out of, like, all good games come out of boredom. Like ladder ball. Just throw these things in the ladder. Like, and they're fun. I mean, skateboarding is I grew up skateboarding. It's the same thing. Like, people, you had this little toy, and people all of a sudden were bored and said, what could we do with it to make it cool, and how can we use a skateboard to interact with our surroundings, So I think once you start eliminating that boredom, people are so overstimulated and have all that stuff, it really can limit your creativity. And people say to me all the time, like, oh man, you're so busy. How are you doing all the stuff? You're doing the music and the art. And I'm like, you just got to limit your distractions, even just a little bit.
Yeah.
And you can get a lot done, But it is like if you write songs. Sometimes if you write songs, you're typing stuff on the computer. It's really easy to be like, oh man, well let me just see what's going on over here. Let me just see what's on YouTube. Let me get some inspiration, and then you know, time goes on. Then all of a sudden you wasted 3 hours and you've got nothing done. And you're like, oh, like we all struggle with that. So I just think if you can just eliminate as much distraction and get back to. Like, bring back boredom.
Yeah.
I think I would put that on a
t-shirt.
Bring back
That's
boredom.
That's a good shirt. I love that.
There is something to be said. I mean, like when you're a kid and you're playing with stuff and I can just remember being a kid and getting a refrigerator box, and you would ride it down the stairs, and be like in the sled, because like what else you're gonna play with? Like you just used your imagination.
Yep.
And I think there's a real beauty in boredom. And so I try to go out of the house without my phone as much as possible sometimes. Like if I'm waiting in line, and it's, because it's the weirdest thing to just sit there and everyone else is on their phone.
I know, you just want to look at someone and be like, hello, but you can't.
Yeah, then they're like, oh, you're creepy?
You're a freak.
Or you're hitting on me, you're a freak, or you're unstable. You know? That's people use the phones as sort of that way to hide from other people in conference. You see it, I've seen it all the time. You walk into somewhere and it's like just you and some other person. They look at you and they're like, I better get on my phone so they don't start talking to me because
there's a name for it. I forget what it's called, but yeah, it's like because I get the same, and I'm victim to this too. I get the anxiety of phone calls. Yeah. I'm not afraid to talk on the phone at all, but like just generally speaking, but I still get this anxiety sometimes, and I don't know what the origins of it for me personally are, but I can at least trace it back to the idea that I'm so busy throughout the day that when I see someone's calling me, oftentimes my first thought is, I don't know how long this conversation's going to last. I don't have time for this. So then I just ignore it and then text them. And that is such a crappy, it's not a way I want to live, but like it's just come to that over years. Like it didn't happen overnight. It's just been over years. I was like, I've sort of, like you said, I've diminished the amount of boredom in my life. Now I'm constantly doing things. Yeah. So then when people try to call or whatever, it's like this huge burden, even though it shouldn't be a burden. Like I have the time, I just don't want to make the time because
sometimes you're like, oh.
Yeah.
And then even when you're on the phone, people are so distracted most of the time you're talking to them that it's like, they're just doing something else.
Yeah, they're doing other things. Or if you go out and
you hang out with someone at dinner and all of a sudden they're on their phone and they're doing something else. Like, I'll call people out on it usually and just be like, yeah, you got something else to do? No, just checking just take a moment, man. Like, let's have some fun, you know?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things. I know we have a good show and we play live when no one's on their phone during the show. And I watch that. Sometimes, people aren't feeling it. But we've played a lot of shows where people get up and start dancing and people aren't on their phones. And I'm like, oh, there's good hope.
Energy.
Like, we've got like people's like focus, so that's always the goal. But yeah, bring back boredom.
I think there's kind of the other side of that coin though too, because I think I've used this argument in talking to people about the songwriting process. Like you and I haven't really talked about this yet. We can kind of get into this if you'd like. I tell people, a lot of my friends growing up, not as much now because now we're a little bit older, but when we were like 18, 20-ish, like a lot of my friends would say to me, I wish I could just quit my job so I'd have all this time to write music. And my counter to that has always been, I've gone through months being unemployed as like an adult, and I never am as productive as I imagined I would have been prior. And when I'm working, obviously it's different if you're like in a situation where you have to work 80 hours a week or something like that. But when I've been working like 40 hours a week, when I come home, I have that experience, like that sort of thing that is now driving my energy to when I get home. Different. I've landscaped before. There's been jobs I've had like then where that was just when I get home I'm dead and I don't want to do anything. But just generally speaking, I think work and going out and actually being busy to a degree, it gives you the kind of experience, quote unquote, to actually produce art. Because I think a lot of times people have this like weird mindset where it's like, I just want to be an artist, and they think when they say I just want to be an artist, it's like this blank slate, and you can just do art. But I think to create art, you still need life experience. Like you still need to be doing things. So there's that kind of balance to it too. Like you should, like you said, you should have boredom. You should have space to create and to do nothing and let your mind wander and all that. But you should also too like have enough going on that you're able to draw from. So it's not, so you're not just another person who's writing about like every song is a breakup or every piece is, you know what I mean? Like your subject matter kind of stays the same over time because that's what your life is.
Like Joe Strummer had a line I always liked. He said, no input, no output. Like you need to be constantly out there like getting stuff in. But to what you were saying, a lot of people say that to me, and I think there is something to be said, like when your time is limited, like you focus on the artwork. Yeah. Like if you do quit your job and you're doing art full time, it's like it's real easy to slack off and be more like lazy about it. But when you got a lot of stuff going and like you're in constant movement, sometimes it's easier to get more artwork done and to be focused in it because your time is that much more valuable because there's less of it. And I feel like I've seen, throughout my time of doing art and music, when things did get slow, like I slacked off. You know what I mean? You almost need something to push against. You need like things in life
pressure,
to sort of like
timelines or
you need
what do you
pressure,
call it?
Deadlines.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, deadlines are perfect. I mean, that's why they have them. I mean, if there's no deadline, people don't get things done. Yeah. And I also think like people also look at like, I think some people look at art And even music is like, as this sort of like fantasy escape thing, you know? And I know people that have said to me for years, like, oh, if I had time, I just want to make this movie, and I wish I had time to make this movie or to make this album and do this, but I just have no time, and I can't find the time. And I'm like, you know, if you wanted to do it, you would find the time and make the time and just do it.
Yeah.
I understand if it's like your escape fantasy, and some people I think just want the glory without putting the effort into it.
You're right. Fantasy is the perfect word for it.
It's a fantasy.
Yep.
If you don't enjoy doing the work, then there's no point really in doing it. You know what I mean? Some people just want to be like, hey, look, I'm a celebrated movie director, but they don't necessarily want to sacrifice and put in the time to do it. So even if they had all the time in the world, they're not going to necessarily get it done.
Yeah.
If you want to do it bad enough, like you find a way to make it happen, you know.
Well, you're an interesting case because I mean, you are someone who's kind of made it doing your art. I mean, like as you've developed a family and you've married, you got kids now. So like, how has that been for you balancing like the kind of the family dynamic and then also this thing? Because you said you work from home, right?
Yeah.
So you got like all these like that we're talking about here. Because like, do you have like a space that separates you, like an office space? Like
I've got a studio and stuff there, and having kids was tough because your time is really not yours, especially when they're young. And when we had our second child, all of a sudden then like you just couldn't afford daycare because daycare is insanely expensive. So all of a sudden it's like, well, to put both kids in daycare, I'd have to pretty much make more than our mortgage payment now. And I would just be working just to make money to put them in daycare. So you're spending time with the kids, which you want to do because you want to be there when they're young and you enjoy that. And then for a long time, it was like I'd watch the kids during the day and then work at night. So you're with the kids, so they go to bed at 7, then you're going to work till like 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night, just getting some stuff done, doing some more work, whatever. As you can. But for me, having kids, I just hit this point where it was like I just felt like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to let my kids down. You know, like I gotta get serious about my artwork because I want my kids to be like, not embarrass my kids. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to embarrass my kids. Like, what's your dad do? He's like some lazy artist. You know what I mean? Because that label comes with something for a kid. He's like an artist and musician. Oh, your dad's like a deadbeat. Just, you know. So I wanted to like do something that they would look at and be proud of. You know. So for me, it wasn't even necessarily about the monetary thing, although that's always a consideration, but
just more that you've done something that you're actually like putting effort into
life
something.
Where, like the kids would look at you and be like, "Yeah, man, like my dad did something cool."
Even going back to the book, like just having like a physical book, and you've also pressed a vinyl, like these physical things that your kids can look at and you can point to and be like, "This is something that I did. Like this is my blood, sweat, and tears." Like that's really cool.
And I also think it's cool to say like, "Look, you can do it your way." And sort of step out of what everyone, you know, the paths that are sort of people think you should go. You know what I mean? There's a lot of different ways to make a life and what is considered quote unquote successful. You know, like, you know, I am doing art and I'm doing music and I'm doing design on my own terms. I'm not making like a ton of money at it. I'm not like incredibly rich. Can always make more, trying to make more. But,
of course.
You know, I always say I'm not a starving artist. I'm a surviving artist. And, you know, there's something to be said for that. Like at least we're living on our own terms, you know. And my wife left her job 2 years ago now. So for the last 2 years, like we're both self-employed, and we're doing like this juggling thing. And like for the first few months, I just remember what happened. I felt like you're in one of those movies where they're trapped in outer space, and all of a sudden there's like a hole. And you're like, we only have this much oxygen left. We're looking at our savings account. And we're like, we only have this much oxygen left. We have to figure out how to plug that hole up before we all die and we lose everything, you know. And like that pressure, and we've worked it out. And you know, knock on wood, it's been awesome, and it's been complete chaos. But it's cool because everything we do, like, means something personally to us. Like we're risking everything, you know. So, you know, I just know so many people now my age, and they have like whatever you want to call it, midlife crises. They just do not seem very happy in their job, and they're going, you know, they're making more money than us, but I'm like, they don't have a purpose,
right?
You know, and I think that's really nowadays what you need is like you need to more than finding a good job is you need to find what your purpose is, and go toward that, you know, because that is what will keep you young and keep you going, to have sort of like to be driven. Like, and I think my wife and I were both very, very driven, which is good. So I think that's how these things sort of happen.
Well, it's so important too. I mean, like I feel similarly, at least for myself, because my wife and I don't have kids yet. We're planning soon to have some, and this has been like a constant thing we talk about is when it comes to money and when it comes to our future planning, and I stress about it all the time. I think about just like what kind of groundwork am I setting right now for that future event, like when that happens, because I know it's going to be like a meteor comes and just completely upheaves everything
for sure
around me. So like that's a big thing with like even just doing this podcast and songwriting and doing. I'm working on a book as well. Like I messaged you and like there's so many things that I've been working on, and like in the process of doing it, just like in my mind, that's actually been a huge motivating factor, is thinking about a future family in the situation and being like, this is stuff that I care about it. It's important to me as a person, and I need for myself to be the best person I can be for when I have kids. And I don't want to be in a situation. And to what you said earlier, obviously everyone's in a different circumstance. I mean, some people can't do that. I know a good friend of mine growing up was one of my best friends. He ended up he got married out of wedlock, and it was an unexpected situation. And he's great. He loves his wife. He's got 2 kids. And they just had another baby. He's great, but he's a hustler too. And like he was one of these kids. He was an artist. He was in the local hardcore music scene. And once he had this kid, it like totally changed his entire like timeline, the way his brain worked. And he was like, oh, I gotta get my shit together. Like he was doing landscaping and stuff prior to that, and then I think he joined a union. He started doing electric work. He started going to school for something, and then all this stuff he started putting in like 80 hours a week, and it could go one of two ways. I don't talk to him as much anymore, so I'm not trying to project what his life is actually like. But I know that just using him as a generic example, that can go 2 ways. We can go, one, he's laying out a foundation for like his family, and that he could work really hard now to be comfortable, to then kind of put time into whatever his hobbies are, or whatever he would like to do. Or to, like you said, your friends who are like now at this age where they have these cushy jobs, you reach that midlife crisis or whatever you want to call it, where you have hustled for years and years and years, but now you're at a point where you're so detached from who you were before you started hustling that it's like you don't even know where to begin. It's like what could I do at that age? And I think those are the things that I think about a lot, just for myself personally, and like who I'm gonna be and like who my wife's gonna be. And it's just it is weird to consider, because you're gonna change.
Oh yeah,
like, we know we're gonna
have
change.
to change. Everyone has to change. But it's funny, I was saying to someone the other day, I think like the new midlife crisis for people my age is women in their 40s become yoga instructors, and men in their 40s start brewing their own beer.
Yes.
They're all like, I don't know. I'm like, what am I into? Like, I need to do something fun. What am I into? Well, I like drinking beer. I'm going to start like brewing beer. I see it all the time. People come up to me all the time. I was like, what's new? I just started brewing beer. I'm like, well, of course you did. Of course you did. But I think that's
great, dude.
I also think people like go for what they think is the sure thing. And I just think like there's like any idea of any security is like false. I know people that are in jobs, and then all of a sudden they lose their jobs and they're like really up shit creek. So for me, it's just like I'm just trying to do something where I can build my name, because I know if I have a sort of a name or a reputation, that's something that I could hopefully just keep building off of, and that will. There's just more value to that.
Right, you're your own brand.
Yeah, right, I'm just trying to build my own brand.
Yeah,
and I don't know. I'm at the age where I've had a lot of friends who died way too young, and looking at what they missed out on, or what they, like you just start thinking like, I realize there is no midlife crisis, because you're thinking you might live to be this age, but that's not guaranteed. For some people, their midlife point is
it could be right now.
It's 15.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You're like, dude, like you got to keep that in perspective. Let's do what you can do now, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Keep it positive. Put out as much, positivity or whatever out there in the universe, and treat people well, and just go for it. I mean, people are just so, scared of failing, scared of succeeding, scared of living.
Yeah, and it's tough too, because I know like a lot of people, especially the younger generations now, it's like the national student loan debt is like $1.5 trillion or something like that. So there's
Insane.
so many kids now growing up. It's like you're growing up already. You're not starting at zero. You're starting at like negative.
Debt.
Yeah. So then it just like adds this accumulative fear and like disability. It is like a disability almost to create, to put yourself out there and to take risks. And it's such a sticky situation.
And with technology, the job market's just
Always
constantly changing.
Yeah,
I mean,
like automation and
like people ask me now, like kids, like what are your kids want to do when you grow up? And I'm like, I don't know what the jobs are going to be like in 15 years.
Yeah.
Because 15 years ago, like there was barely an internet. Do you know what I mean, or whatever? There was no social media.
And everybody made fun of, like, I remember being a kid, my parents would be like, you can't be a gamer. You can't do, like, video or whatever. Now it's like kids are making money doing being influencers. They're YouTube stars. They're streamers.
Yeah,
like,
that stuff trips me out, you know? I just figure, like, get your money now because that train ain't going to be there forever, man. You know, like, those things come and go. But it's funny to think, like, making money being, like, an influencer. I don't even,
like, what's next? Like, what's next?
But there's there's got to be a short shelf life on there because you can't say that trendy because younger kids are going to come up and push you right out. So
it's inflated. The whole thing's inflated. That's the weird thing about all these markets is like, especially with the digital currency, and you find this out more and more every year of how many of the numbers are skewed on all these sites, like how many fake YouTube users there are, how many bots. Like people pay for followers, they pay for views, and then it's like, I think it's a huge thing with a lot of kids, especially like kids that want to be influencers. What they'll do is they'll start their profile or whatever, then they'll pay for these followers and these engagements, and then it gets in enough fake people up to the point where they look real, and then they get real opportunities, then grow real followings. So it's like this weird thing where like the whole thing is inflated across the spectrum, and like you got like your 1% who are making it and who are real, or not, maybe it's like 5%, but you know what I mean? It's like most of it is just this really like fake, just difficult environment, and like I don't know, you wonder what's next, or you wonder what's going to happen to the whole thing.
It's a weird game, and I'm sure I get those ads all the time. People reaching out to me like, guaranteed 10,000 real followers and all that stuff, and pay money. And I'm like, I don't. It doesn't matter that much to me in the end, It's just weird, man. Most of the time I just sit back and laugh at it. Even like on Instagram, like I'm on there, but I'm mostly I post and I look a little bit, but I try to limit my time on there because it is really addictive. And I was reading some stuff, an article recently about how they modeled the swiping and all that on gambling. It's like the same sort of mechanism to like using slot machines where people just stand there and look at it and do it, and you're addicted more to the flash,
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's totally how it is. So I try to like limit my. And I was reading too another article that was suggesting turning your phone to black and white.
Oh, interesting.
Because it's like, if you do that, you're less likely to keep going back to look at it because there's something like ingrained in us to want to look at beauty and like full color and stuff like that.
Right.
So that's why they make everything so colorful.
And all that,
It's like this recent article I read, and I'm going to do a horrible job paraphrasing it. But so I did that for a week. I had my phone on black and white. It was kind of cool, but it was weird because then you look at the rest of the world and you're like, whoa, that's right, it's in color. But it's like you're living in like Casablanca, or something.
Right.
Everything's black and white, and you go back in color and you're like, whoa, this is like the Wizard of Oz.
Right.
It's really, it was really bizarre.
Oh, that's so weird. I love that. That's so true, though. That's great. The psychology of just all these little tricks. Like
they put all this stuff in there to like get you like. I mean,
we're
really,
the rats. Like we're the rats.
They just want to like, keep you hooked onto it, and the target marketing and all that stuff. Like I disable my microphone on any apps that I can because I just don't want people to keep targeting me, telling me what I like and don't like.
That's my job, dude.
You know what I mean? I know. I get it. I know. I'm hip to it, man. I get.
That's why I hate myself.
I don't know. And I get it. And sometimes I like it. But again, it's like sometimes I don't know if I like something else or not. I want someone to turn me on to something I don't know about.
Yeah.
Like people are like, And Netflix is like that too now. They
algorithms and...
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you're victim to all this. And that's the weird thing.
Algorithms are so off sometimes too. Like for a while I was watching tons of stuff on YouTube about like hip hop history and all these like interviews with people around like different rap stars and stuff, and I was heavily going down these rabbit holes watching all these videos.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the target ads I started getting were like black only dating sites.
Yeah.
You know what
You're
I
like,
mean?
this is not
And I'm like, these algorithms are off, And I read articles too about where Netflix, when you see the you scroll through, they'll show you like an image of the movie. It's like a the still or whatever. They change that depending on what race they think you are and depending on what sex you are or what you're into to make you think. Yeah, so like
and
all
like
that's
all-
even.
yep.
So like if I go onto your Netflix and started flipping through, like I'll see different images picked for the same movie than what's on mine. Like
so
like
weird.
so like if this movie has like a secondary character is like an African American and they think you're an African American, they'll start showing that.
Right.
And so-
I've noticed this with like even
And so based on some of my movie prep, I start going on these rabbit holes of watching these movies in a certain genre. That stuff will start picking up.
it's so weird, man.
And for a while, I just saw nothing but like Hispanic dudes on like everything, and I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Like, it's just it's crazy, man.
I've literally noticed. I don't know what this is indicative of off the top of my head, but maybe it's because on our Netflix at least, I watch a ton of like just dude type shows.
Yeah,
I mean, like
yeah.
not all of it is like just exclusively that, but it's a
Yeah.
lot of like action, thriller, like that type of stuff. And I've noticed that almost all the thumbnails for those shows and movies is like the female, that it's the lead or like the supporting role or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, that's so interesting. Like it's almost always the woman. And I don't know if it's like a sex appeal thing, or maybe it's like, or maybe it actually the Netflix account is under my wife, who's a woman.
Yeah.
So maybe like they're thinking it's relating to my wife as a woman. I don't know what it is, but I'm always curious as to like these weird thumbnails because it is different. It changes
Yeah.
all the time. And I'm like,
I
that's
see it on YouTube every time I subscribe to this movie channel. Like trailers, and every time I see the trailers, doesn't matter what genre the movie is, it's always a half-naked girl on there. It could be a horror movie, it could be like a historical drama. They'll take or it could be anything, whatever it is. They're gonna put that on there because they think you're gonna look at it as a man and be like, she's hot. What's this movie about?
Right.
And then you watch it and you're like, what? That had nothing to do with what you thought it was.
Yeah.
But there's that little like half a second in there. They put that in there.
Yeah.
Just the psychology behind that is just crazy.
yeah. And you wonder why there's like a mental health crisis. I mean, this is like what I do, obviously, in
Yeah.
advertising, and it's why I hate it. But it's also just like part of the game we're all playing. Like it's just the inevitable.
Yeah.
Like when I talk to people about the kind of, like this is just a brief tangent, but like the kind of history of how advertising's evolved, you can see over decades like certain trends, and like
Yeah.
you remember. And like the like obviously there's always been Playboy or whatever, but like in the 90s specifically and like even the early 2000s a bit, there was a lot of the movies and the TV shows hyper sexuality in like the
yeah,
shows, and that appeared in the ads. Like a lot of the marketing at that time was hypersexualized. And then at one point in like the end of the 2000 era, that it was so frequent that people were just so inundated by it that it just wasn't affecting people as much
Yeah.
anymore. So then it kind of like it dulled down and railed back a little bit, and then people started putting more just different like explosive trends, and like you start using these different tools. Like we were talking about fear earlier.
Yeah.
It's like there's all these different like really like baseline tribal psychology type things that we use as our advertising, and up until very recently, there was all these different trends. Like, let's, back in like the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, whatever, it was like the feel good stuff. Like, let's make people like the family, like wholesome. Like this is a
This is what you can have.
Yeah, when your husband comes home from work, you'll cook him this meal or whatever it is, and like, or when you're working in the kitchen, like you want this new microwave, and it's like
enjoy this cigarette. And you're looking over your vista. Life is grand. This could be your life.
And it starts there, and then it's kind of just like obviously snowballed into absolute chaos. Where now we just have every little piece of human psychology is in our advertising, and then it's a constant thing. And like I hate it. I also understand it. It's part of the world we live in now. But you have to think it's like collapsing in on itself. Like it's like what's the next? Like you think 10 years down the line, like what these platforms like YouTube or Netflix are going to look like. I mean, is it going to look like a Black Mirror kind of dystopia or what? Because it's odd to project out like what's next.
I just feel like no matter what, like things just keep changing like forever. Like that's just a part of nature, right? Everything has to sort of evolve and change.
Yeah.
And even if you target people so much into one little tunnel of what they think you're like, eventually people are going to get just bored with that, and you want to look for something else. People do want to find something new, but. I don't know. I keep hoping at some point, like a younger generation will come up and just say, like, man, let's get back.
We've had enough.
Let's get back to nature. Like, you guys are all fools. Like I'm waiting for that sort of like the rebellion to be like, dude, this is all BS. Like, let's get back to like real people. Sort of like the hippie ideal that sort of tried to come up in the '60s. Like maybe something like that will happen, and young kids will rebel, but I don't know if that can because they're targeted at such a young age now.
Right, they're growing up with it.
They're growing up with it, like, and I mean, you can't go anywhere without being inundated with screens or advertising. You know, at the post office, they got a new TV there hitting me with ads. You know, you go out to eat at restaurants, they're there. You go to pump gas, you got ads right there. I mean, it's really like you're on your phone. You're like everywhere. You're and you got
to think too. It's more. There's more people. There's more mediums. So there's more markets. It's like I was talking to I think I might have mentioned it to you before. This journalist with the Atlantic a few weeks ago. And we were talking about just how clickbait evolved, and even how like the 24-hour news cycle evolved. It's like these are things that. Yes, in part they evolved as part of an establishment, corporate entity, whatever you want to call that, like the capitalist system kind of evolved these things in part due to the bottom line, but also they evolved because there's a demand there. Like people want that clickbait. They want those like kind of like juicy headlines. They want that like drama, gossip on like these celebrities, and so that's the other weird thing is like like you mentioned the ads are everywhere. It's like there's more people everywhere. There's more TV shows. There's more celebrities.
Yeah,
there's
people
more
are going for it. I mean,
it's just all over the place.
It is. You get what you know, you reap what you sow. You know, people, you are getting the world that they want, or else they'd go out there and change it. And most people, I think, are just so busy or so distracted even to question things.
Yeah.
Even nowadays, I find with people, if you question them on something, even just little things, they get really like annoyed really quick.
Offended.
And it's like,
there's
offended,
a quick knee jerk.
Quick. It's what do you mean? Why are you quit? No, that's not that. And they get. I'm like, whoa. I'm asking just a question. Like, did you ever think about maybe something like? No. Why'd you do that? No. And you're like, whoa. Like, because everyone's just in their bubble.
Yeah.
You just say, hey man, I'm outside this bubble. Maybe you might like it out here. No. People get really tense about it.
Yeah.
At least. You know, in America, I don't know what it's like in other countries as much.
I was listening to this comedian named Theo Vaughn. He was on this, I forget what the show was. It might have been a podcast or YouTube show, and he was saying, I forget if this was his theory or if he got this from somewhere else, but he lives in LA, and he was saying that whatever this was his or an idea, that the whole concept of podcasts actually it originated mostly in LA. Like the people that started it were like comedians and all that were doing it. And or at least popularized it. And it's interesting how like it exploded in that area. And part of his theory was that the people in LA, because it's such a busy, high like intensity, like very, I don't want to say the whole thing's fake, but like it's like NYC, like it's an industry. So like people are constantly like they're stepping over each other, and there's ladders.
Hustle, everyone's trying to get ahead.
Everyone's
and get their name
hustling.
out.
Yeah. So like the idea was that like people started these podcasts as almost like an escape back to conversation, because it was like they don't have time in the day to have real conversations with real people anymore. So now it's like, here's an excuse. We'll sit down on the couch, or we'll sit down at a table, put a mic here, we'll catch up, and then we'll put it out there. So it's like a win-win. We both get content for our brands, but then we also just get to hang out, because we don't get to hang out in real life anymore. So it's like
that makes a lot of sense. I think there's probably some truth to that. And one thing I really like about podcasts is like, it really goes against this sort of attitude about everyone having such a short attention span. Because so many of those podcasts, you look at them and they're like, dude, that's 3 hours long.
We're going on 2 hours right now.
That's a 3-hour interview, and I'm going to listen to the whole thing. I might be driving in the car or like at the gym or something, but I'll get into it, or I'm working and I'm listening to that. Sometimes I listen to that, those kind of things even more than music. Maybe it is sort of like the hanging out thing. I think there's probably a lot of truth to that. It's really cool, you know, to go that in depth, because that's all I hear all the time is people are like, no one has the attention span for anything and this and that. But
I think it's changing. I do. In some ways.
I think it is changing, you know. I think everything will just keep evolving. And once you think everything's all figured out, it's like something else is going to come up and change. I mean, that's the only thing that's constant in life and nature is change.
Yeah.
You know, you have to adapt or die, as they say. So
it's true.
You know, and just do it however you want to do it, you know. But it's funny, like I remember for years I putting out vinyl records, people like in the early 90s, and people were like, why are you putting out vinyl records? Vinyl's over, dude.
Right.
No one's ever buying vinyl. CDs, tapes, no one's ever buying. No, dude, I'm like, I like vinyl. We're going to put it out. And then eventually, like, it went down to nothing, and now it's come back to where it's like outselling everything else. And they got vinyl in Target now again, you know.
It's so crazy.
And my attitude about it is like, hey, I liked it then. I bought it. I like it now. I bought it. I'm going to keep buying it, whether it comes up and comes back or leaves or whatever. That's just what I'm into, you know? So people make a big deal about it. I'm like, you do whatever you want to do. I'm going to do whatever I want to do. I'm not going to let other people dictate my tastes, you know?
Yeah. I wonder if that'll happen. I imagine that'll happen to books too, or maybe it's already happening and I'm just not paying attention. Just
I know people that are in the publishing industry. I asked them about it. A friend of mine works at Simon and Schuster and stuff, and I was like, he was in the ebook section for a while, and I said, well, he said, has the growth been coming? And he's like, it plateaued. He's like, book sales, print books still account for I think like 70%, and ebooks are still like only like 30%. He said there was a rise and it plateaued.
That's interesting.
It is interesting, and you wouldn't think that, and the sort of narrative's not put out there. Where he's like, no, we still make
because
more
the
money out of
advertising.
books.
It's like
right,
again, you're seeing ads for Kindles and whatever all the time.
Yeah. Although I even think like the Kindles, like I don't see them as advertised as much. I guess because the iPad.
Right, I was gonna say like the
pads,
pad,
like stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I love bookstores again, just for the same reason I love record stores, because I'm going to be exposed to books there that I'm not necessarily going to find. Like, when I go on Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com or whatever, they're sending me books that they think I'm going to like. And a lot of times I'm very thankful because I see books on there that I don't necessarily, that I'm like, I didn't even know that came out. Oh my gosh. But I would just, if I only looked at that, I would sit there and be just reading a total stream of music biographies. You know what I mean? Because I tend to get trapped into like reading these music biographies because I love them. But then I try to force myself to read some other stuff to sort of, just like expand my knowledge or interests or whatever. And bookstores are good for that because I love just going around, just spending the time browsing through books and finding something new and being like, I never heard of this.
The
what
treasures.
Is this?
Yeah.
Like
the nuggets.
I love the hunt of it. And that's one thing that is missing with a lot of this target marketing. It's like, it's just too easy.
Yeah.
The Easter egg's right here.
Yeah.
I don't want to know where the Easter egg. I want to go look for the Easter egg. I don't want to know what's in the Easter egg.
That's a great way of putting it.
I don't want it's like you're getting the map. Like, here's the Easter egg. Here it is. It has all your favorite candy in it.
Yeah.
But I want to work for it a little bit or discover something I've never had before.
Right.
That
is why it's so great to have, even like going back to the record store MaTones with Adam. It's like having a guy like that who can like kind of guide you into maybe some of the more obscure elements and more obscure areas that you're going to find a really unique treat. Because, even just looking back through history, whether it's music or books, whatever, the things that are like the documentation, like the winners write history. So it's like everything that's documented as like your mainstream, your bestsellers, like the most iconic books, the most iconic songs. It's like these are your most popular people of this time. Whereas like you can go back through history and find like these really obscure novels and like obscure, you know what I mean, like philosophical writings. And it's like you get some really cool ideas. I mean, when you do that, it's just not as, I guess, appeasing to our monkey brains. It's like way easier. Like if I go on Amazon, like you said, with the algorithm, it knows what I like, and it's like, oh, here's this New York Times bestseller that everybody's talking about right now. And I'm like, oh yeah, it sounds right up my alley. It's got 5-star reviews versus
and it could be a great book, and you would love it, and it's great. But after a while, sometimes you just gotta. It's good to just. You got to push yourself a little bit,
Yeah.
And like sometimes I'll read books. I'm like, I don't know, I'm not digging this, but I have to finish it. Like, and my wife's always just like, well, just read something else. I'm like, no, I just feel like I started. I got to commit. I got to just finish this book and get through it because then I'll read something that is trashy that I just want to read.
Like the candy. Candy.
Whatever, the Motley Crue biography or whatever.
Yeah.
Like same thing with movies. Like I watched that stupid Motley Crue biopic on Netflix. The day it came out, I think I was homesick and I watched it. Like I'm not even that big of. I'm not even a Motley Crue fan, but I knew like it was going to be horrible and I'd enjoy it and turn my mind off and be like, oh yeah, this is horrible. I watched every single music biopic or like documentary that comes out, whether I know something about the band or not. I'm just obsessive about that stuff. I'll see it and be like, all right, let me see what this is about. And, I love that stuff.
Just nerd out.
Yeah, just nerd out totally.
It's great, man. It's
I'm
great.
Gonna crack this open.
Hit it. Yeah, hit it. Got your beers.
I'll finally try this.
Who did it again?
This beer.
For people listening.
For people listening that don't know, it's called The Coming Tide, and it has my collage artwork on the outside.
So cool.
That's actually the same name. They named the beer after the artwork, but it's a collaboration beer between Hidden River Brewery, which is over in Douglasville, which was founded by a friend of mine named Kevin, who started it, and they're awesome. And they did this collaboration. They brewed it with another brewery in Westchester called Levante Brewing Company. But I've known Kevin for a long time, and he's an artist as well. And that's how I met him. We were showing at the same gallery in Philadelphia for a while. And we kind of became friends. And for years, he was saying to me, in fact, I talk about it in the book. I have a little thing in there about it. He was just like, I want to start brew my own beer. And I was like, yeah, it's a hard thing to crack into. I don't know, dude. He's like, I'm going to do it. And he kept talking about it. And then he did, and he started small and built it up. Now they've got they're at this location down in Douglasville called the Brinton Lodge, which is a really cool building that's been around for, it's a historic building. I think it's been around for like 300 years.
Wow.
But it was a stop on the Underground Railroad for a while. It was a brothel, has all kinds of like a sort
Cool
of history.
Yeah,
and
that's
it's
awesome.
apparently like extremely haunted. Like they have paranormal investigators go down there and do like
Sweet.
tests, and you talk to anyone that works there and they all have stories about seeing certain ghosts. I've been in some of the rooms and it's like some of the rooms are definitely weird and creepy. I've never seen anything myself, but it's like I love that kind of stuff.
It's just fun.
So
It's just fun.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm just stoked for him because they just expanded their operation there, and you know, it like we were talking earlier. It's good to see some like friends who are just like, hey, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
It's a crazy idea, but they do it and they make it work, and they're putting in the time and the effort. So that's why I'm always just so stoked when they come to me and say, can we put your artwork on the can? I'm like, yeah, dude. Like, you know, that, to me, it's like as much a tribute to friendship and to the effort he put into it, and just, you know, it's good to see friends on the come up and doing something good.
It's
and, like,
legit,
making
man.
it happen.
These things look awesome. I mean, even just like
the beer culture is like, you know, anyone that's in like these microbrew things, like
they're everywhere. One just popped up right down the street. Yeah.
they're crazy, and like you hang out with people and they're talking about like the mouthfeel of the beer, and they start talking about like the difference between the water in this town versus the water in this town.
Yeah.
How it, and you're like, whoa, this is like
This is
people
deep.
are into it. And then they're writing
It's like
reviews
cigars,
and stuff.
yeah.
It's basically, I think it's like wine snobbery for people
Right,
that can't afford wine.
right.
But the cool thing about Hidden River too is that they use most of their ingredients come within like a 15-mile radius. And
Wow.
that goes for their food and stuff like that. So they work a lot with organic local farmers. Like my father-in-law is a beekeeper, and he has
Oh, that's awesome.
like 15, like probably now like 15 to 18 hives, tons of honey. And so sometimes we'll sell Kevin at Hidden River, you know, honey for different beers and stuff that they make, or for their restaurant and stuff like that. So it's cool. Yeah, the beekeeping stuff is wild. I don't get too involved in it, but we have 2 hives like in our backyard that he comes over and takes care of and stuff.
So
and,
cool.
And I reap the benefits of the honey all the time.
So jealous.
It's so good. I should have brought you some, man. I totally would. I'll bring you some.
Oh, I'd love that. We have these. I forget the farm. I get it from them every time though. It's this. It's in Quakertown, I want to say. But these girls, it's like a big family.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure they've got like I don't know how many kids, but these 2 girls station up right on the main road out here, 113. And probably like spring through fall, I want to say they'll do it like every Saturday and Sunday, some weeknights actually too. And they have they literally just, it's in some like an auto shop, like
Yeah.
right along the main road. They let them just set up like a tent type thing there. They put signs out that says local honey, and these people sell out. I mean,
Yeah.
it's such a cool, like just like local everything. I mean, I know that's big coming back just
Yeah.
in different areas, but it's cool when you have like the really good stuff and people that are able to contribute that type of thing locally,
Yeah.
because it's just, I don't know, it makes it special.
It is cool to see that. I like the idea of like little smaller boutique-y things,
Yeah, like
and like
artisan.
local things.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that stuff has come again. I just think people are starved for a sense of community. You know what I mean? Like I think people just really don't have that sense of a community anywhere
Yeah.
as much now. That's why I like. Well, that's one thing I like about Phoenixville. Whenever I go down there, like
yeah.
they do all those cool, like that Lulu Festival, antique one thing
Right.
down there. Go in there,
Yep.
run. There's so many people down there, and you.
It's huge.
Yeah, you know, all that stuff I think is just good to get people out there and like meeting with people and finding stuff that you can't just get that's not necessarily mass produced, you know, because after a while you walk around like, especially with kids, like all the kids, you see a group of kids, they all got the same clothes on because they all got them from Target. You know what I mean? There's only so many shirts where you
Right,
could buy at
right.
Target. And it's just the way it is nowadays, you know,
Yeah.
it's just a fact of life. So you go there and they're just like, oh yeah, we got that same thing. Like, you
Yeah.
know, because how many places can you go to buy clothes for kids these days?
And a
you
lot
know?
of them are like, they're using the same, what do you call it, like models and all that, like between
Yeah.
Target, Walmart, Amazon, like IKEA, like all these places have very similar styles and similar manufacturers and all of that.
And it's
But-
funny, like you look at a national thing too. Like in the past, you would have these sort of, you know, different segments of the country had different styles. You know what I mean? Like even like fashion wise,
Yeah.
or looks or taste, or like even going back to music. Like you would in the 50s and 60s be able to put out like a 45 single and have a regional hit where you were like top 10 for like the Midwest.
Right.
It might not have broken out past that, but you could be big and make it in like these little regional pockets. Now everything's so, you know, with globalization and stuff, and, you know, so few people owning the radio stations and that stuff. It's like all that sort of localized culture has just sort of dissipated because you can go to any town in the country now and you go there and you're like, we're at the Olive Garden. It's a different Olive Garden. The layout is mirrored to the one that I'm at. Usually the bar's over there, but here it's over here. It's different, Menu's the same. Then you're going to go to the Target and looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
And everything's kind of the same, like a lot of the regional flavors. So this bringing back of like local stuff and things that are like from the region, I think is just super cool. You know?
It's cool. And like Phoenix was a great example of a local economy that I think it was like 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago at this point, they started their like revitalization program. They really invested in that time. I mean, obviously there's complex aspects of it, like the whole gentrification thing, which sucks, and you're pushing like a lot of the poor people out of like the main strip. But it is. I mean, like I've had this conversation with so many people. I'm
sure because you're from around here, so it's like a little more in.
Yeah, well,
like deeper,
Yeah, and like the whole conversation on gentrification specifically, as a lot of these like smaller towns kind of revitalize, it's such a complex one because I've never heard someone give a good alternative solution to it. It's like, how do you compete with money? It's like people come in with money and they just start buying buildings and they just start pushing people out. It sucks. Like it's a shitty reality for the people who are in those lower income brackets that are forced into these, whether it's ghettos or they're just forced out of like the main area that they grew up in or that they lived in, and that part of it sucks. But at the same time, it's like I don't know what the alternative solution is to it because no one seems to have a good one, and two, it is like I think hopefully at least down the line, like Phoenix will be a great example. The local economy is booming then with new businesses, new jobs. Like that in the past 10 years, the amount of bars and restaurants and boutique shops, it's like...
Phoenixville, it's breweries.
It's
I think
insane.
Someone told me like they had the most concentration of like bars and breweries in
all
any
in like
place
a couple blocks.
Within the country. Like it's like...
Really?
Now because, I mean, they've all... Like you just walk around there. Every time a new building, new store comes down there, I'm like, ooh, what's it going to be? I get all excited looking. I'm like, oh, it's a brewery.
That's
like
another brewery.
Bar. I'm like... But how is that going to even be sustained? But they all make money.
Because people bar crawl.
Yeah,
or whatever.
But there's like 14 down there or something. I think someone told me some ridiculous number, and I'm like, can't we just get like, I don't know, a good Indian restaurant down there or something, or a bookstore? Although I did hear a bookstore is coming in.
There's a bookstore coming back.
Just something different. I mean, I just want a little bit of variety. Like, is that too much to ask?
That's the other thing too with all these local industries. Like the bars are what run them, so that's the other shitty reality with local economies.
Because boutique stores, everything's getting pushed out by the bigger. Chains, except for like bars and restaurants, the only thing. So most of these little communities, that's what survives. Like we were saying about coffee shops. Like it's hard to have a coffee shop and make any money nowadays, which stinks. But
it does. Like this town specifically, Souderton. I mean, it's an old town, and the local. It's very Mennonite, so it's very has like a pretty strong religious heritage. And the township here. I mean, they don't want to. They don't want to. I want to say it's not the township necessarily. It's the township itself is in large part controlled and run by the religious community here.
Yeah.
So a lot of those individuals, it's not everybody, but a lot of those individuals for literally generations. I forget, they have a term for it. It's called like mattress something. Like it's this old term for like Mennonites keeping these things under the mattress.
Yeah,
and like,
They
I know
literally
what you're
talking about.
They buy the liquor licenses. That Some of them are like $600,000, and they just buy them and keep them so no one can come in and like open up bars.
Yeah.
And like part of me gets it because I get that like it's their heritage. They don't want their town to become a bar town. At the same time, like the local economy has just suffered so much over the years. Like it's hard for. There's no foot traffic. Like there's no reason for people to come in and to walk around, and like it's just catch-22. I'm like,
it's tough.
Yeah, but that's like every local town. It's like how do these local towns reemerge? It's like alcohol and like really nice restaurants.
I think that's true even with New York City. Like when I go back there nowadays in New York, I mean, there's so many less like smaller mom and pop stores and everything's just come down and so many more chains.
Right.
It's like you walk around, there's tons of Starbucks and there's much less independent coffee shops, even in New York City.
Which is like you think they'd all be.
Or even independent bookstores or anything. Like you can go down there and there's like a Papa John's pizza. I'm like, what the hell is a Papa John's pizza doing in like the home of pizza? Like Glorious Pizza, you got Papa
New
John's.
York.
Like who is going there? Like why is it even allowed to happen? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's like putting one in like Italy. Like what? Like it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It'd be like having a Taco Bell like in Mexico. What is it doing there? Like no, it should not. it shouldn't be there. It doesn't make any sense. But yeah, some of those places are struggling. But one place I like, have you ever been to the Grand Theater? It's over in East Greenville.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's small. It's like they do like the matinees for like $5 or
$3
whatever.
or something like that. Yeah, that place is the best. I take my kids there all the time because they got it really worked out well because they only show like whatever the hot kids movie, first run movie is, and they don't sell advance tickets and you have to pay cash. So when you go there, it's like it almost always sells out.
Yeah.
But I could take my kids there. We can go to the movies and get popcorn and drinks and spend less than $20.
Right.
For the whole, and you're seeing like they got digital sound, 7.1 surround sound, digital projection, looks great. The seats are old school movie seats; they're not like the recliner ones. But I like that because everyone's sort of crammed in.
Yeah.
The excitement in there is like palatable. The vibe is there. The kids are excited to watch the movie, and you're laughing with everyone. And because nowadays, like if you go to the movies, like at the the Regal or something, people buy their tickets in advance. They get their seat. Half the time it's like empty.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there in these recliners by yourself, and it's kind of like lame.
Yeah.
I'd almost rather like watch it at home. Like I like going to see a movie where there's like a lot of people in there, and it's like going to see a comedy show by yourself.
Right.
You're like, the vibe is different, you know. Like you want to get the energy off other people and the excitement.
It's all about the audience. Like my wife and I saw Get Out recently, and it was such a good audience. Like people were just so into it. Like the jump parts, or like some of the more funny parts. Like you got people making commentary and like people laughing and freaking out. And it was never like there's sometimes you go to a movie and like there's audience, like there's just douchebags in the audience. They're being like, this sucks, or maybe they're just being rowdy or being on their phone. But this is just like a good experience. And like I can't remember prior to that the last time I went to a movie and felt like I was part of the audience.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a good feeling when you go to something like that. Like,
it is cool. Some people I feel they're like ready to get out of there by the time they get in. Like they just can't even sit still. And they're like checking their phone, or like they just can't get wrapped up and lost in the movie. And maybe because they are so overstimulated with screens and stuff they're seeing all the time, they can't just get lost into it. It's a shame because I do like that community aspect of going to the movies as well. Yeah. I want to see Us. I haven't seen that yet. The other one, is that the dude?
Oh yeah, dude, phenomenal, man. Oh my gosh, so good. Yeah, it was. I was trying to think. My wife and my coworker and his wife went to go see it, and it was one of those movies. It's there's a lot of layers to it.
Yeah,
so it's kind of.
I heard if you should probably see it like a couple of times.
Yeah, I want to see it again because and it's one of those things in hindsight. My wife, right away we were like reading about it, and the first day I had like pretty mixed feelings on it. But like in hindsight, it's like it's just unique. It's just like a unique experience. Like in the movie, I was trying to I think overthink parts of it.
Yep.
And like to your point of kind of getting lost in the experience, like I don't think I fully immerse myself, but it's really it's different enough from, especially in that genre. Like I love that genre, and I've talked to so many people about this and how it's such a difficult one to really break through in any way. Because I mean, it's like I don't know what it is about that genre, but people just make the crappiest movies. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like I love horror and like
love
thriller
horror too, and there's like it's
so bad.
It's so bad.
Oh my gosh, dude. Yeah, it's just
because people just go for like the cheap jump. Like they don't really get. You know, there's no suspense. Yeah,
and it's almost become an industry to make bad horror movies.
Oh yeah,
that's like the weird thing about it. Yeah. So
to me, it's like the same thing with punk rock music. It's like it's so easy to do like a really bad punk rock, like do something great and different and reinvent it is extremely difficult.
Well, and like there's something too to add like that kind of like just the raw, like authentic, whatever it is. Like I mean, obviously with Jordan Peele, he's like bringing like a very unique perspective and a very unique storytelling element to the genre, and like I think there's something to be said about that too. And there's certain bands I know I listen to, like what are they called? Cloud Nothings. You ever listen to them?
Yeah, they're great.
Like, they're phenomenal. And like I remember the first time such a good sound. I remember the first time I heard them. I was talking to this guy I recorded with a few years back. He said that he knew that, I don't know if he knew the guy or if he read about this somewhere, that the singer recorded vocals in a mic that was, I guess, singing through a monitor that was in like a washing machine or something like that. Something just crazy, like to kind of add that like garage feeling to it. And like I love when something, whether it's a movie that's like an indie type film, or if it's like a song that's like kind of trying, because when you listen to Cloud Nothing, it's not like, I don't feel like I'm listening to like a low budget garage, just like kids in their garage. It feels like it's like an actual band, but it has that element of like it's this unique, authentic, kind of gritty thing.
Some like character to it.
Yeah, it got some character.
I remember when My Morning Jacket first came out and started breaking big, and that guy had this huge reverb on his voice. I was like, how did he get that reverb? And then I read they were from they're from somewhere down south, like Kentucky or something. And apparently they recorded the reverb in like an old corn silo.
Wow.
They did it like old school, where you'd send the speaker into the corn silo and have a mic in there just to get the reverb, and you'd adjust it like that. Because back in the day, that's like how reverb was done, right? You have a reverb room, which had the plates in it or whatever, or reverb echo chamber in the attic that would be built, something like this. You'd send it in, you'd get a natural reverb, and the character of that's just different than sort of like the effect boxes. You can sort of hear it. So I love that. Like the stories that like how people make that kind of stuff. I'm always just fascinated by that.
Yeah.
I remember watching, especially when you talk about like early rock and roll. Like I love stuff like Buddy Holly, and I remember watching documentaries on him, and you hear about how they recorded some of that stuff, and you're like, oh yeah, that's not even a drum. He was playing a box. Oh, he slapped like that song every day,
Yeah.
Like he's just playing the drums on his knees.
The percussion, yeah.
And they recorded that all live, and you're like, wow, that's amazing. Like no one would do that nowadays, or you'd overdub it. And
Exactly. To get that like sound, you're now doing this digitally. Like
right,
it's like, oh, we have the digital like knee slap sound. And
I think that's sort of the problem with another problem with music. Not to sound like I'm just going to list all my grievances, like I said. Is that artists have so many options. Like you could do anything, and I think that's just really. I think people just can't get past that. I think it's better to put yourself in like a creative box and say, these are my limitations. What can I make with this limited thing? Because if you can do anything, you can fall down a rabbit hole. Going back to the collage, like all my collages are done analog, right? Like I find the magazines, I cut the images out, I put them together, and then I glue them down. Digitally, a lot of people work digitally, which is fine. I can't do that because there's just too many choices. Because all of a sudden, if you're working digitally, you can take an image, you can resize it, you can have multiple versions of them, you can do all these things, you can change the color. And to me, it's like you can just go in that rabbit hole where all of a sudden you really lose perspective on what you're working on. So what I like about doing the collage is that it gets me away from the screen. I'm working with something physical with my hands, and I'm creating something with this old material, and you're sort of taking something that's old and reinterpreting it and making it something new. And you're bringing back images from the past and using them as a way to comment on what's going on now in the future, if that makes sense, So, and I think it's good. I make sure I keep myself with these limitations, because once you can cheat and do whatever, I think it just hurts you creatively.
Well, the limitations give you perspective. I mean, this is the whole thing.
And again, it's like it makes you be creative. It forces you to make it work, And I think that's what's cool about recording analog versus recording digitally. It's like if you only had like one mic or a couple mics to make an album like they did back in the 50s, and you're micing the room and everything had to be cut live, like you had to find a way to make it work. Like, all right, you want hand claps on this record? You got to find your friend has to come over and do the hand claps on the record. And maybe they're not perfect time. Maybe it's off a little bit, or like the sounds are bouncing off of each other. It just becomes like this more organic thing, And I like that. I think that's part of the problem now. Is like digital makes everything so easy, but not much that's really important comes from anything that's easy.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Like I always say, like a seed, for it to grow, it has to push itself out of the ground. That's really hard. It's not easy for a seed to grow. So you have to make it hard for yourself. And I always think like if something's too easy, then maybe it's not the right way to go. You have to sort of create these things for yourself to make it hard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, you need structure to be able to break out of a structure. This is like something I always go back to with even like within religious context, because I've heard there's this guy named Richard Rohr who I used to love. He was a Franciscan friar, he's kind of like a philosopher in a lot of ways, and he would he'd always say that, and it's just from his perspective, but it's interesting even as a metaphor. It's like he'd always say it's better to raise your kids religious or with like a certain set of beliefs that they can then tear down those beliefs as they get older, versus like if you raise your kids with no structure or whatever, then like as they get older, they don't have a structure to rebel against or to tear down. And like that can obviously work in different contexts, like political ideology, religion, whatever it might be. But it's interesting to consider too, because it's like today there's this trend of I guess you could call it like loose spirituality, where like there's certain people who they're yearning for purpose. Maybe they came from a religious background, they want that, but they don't want to go back to like the fundamentalism of it. Yeah. And then they end up just being kind of like loose, and they kind of like, oh, I like this part of Buddhism, I like this part of like Eastern mysticism, whatever it might be. And
there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But at the same time, when you kind of like just keep yourself loose like that, just like with having like the digital options of like Photoshop, like there's
Right.
so much out there that you end up actually not saying much or believing much. Like your identity isn't formed on anything solid.
Right.
So then like what you produce or what you believe isn't coming from a unique perspective anymore. Now you're just kind of like everything, you know?
Yeah.
I think I forget who quoted it. It might have been, it wasn't Churchill. It was Chesterton, I think, like G.K. Chesterton, I think. He said that it was like the purpose of keeping an open mind is to shut it on something eventually. I forget the purpose of, like, I forget the exact quote or who attributed it to, but it's basically the idea that, like, it's good to keep an open mind. It's good to, like, change perspective, to break down what you believe. But at the same time, like, you're a person, you have an ego, you have an experience, you have things that make you you, and it's almost better to explore what that is and put that into the world instead of trying to, like, pretend that you can, like, take on the ideas and the worldviews and everything from everywhere else. And I think for, like, whether it's art or whether it's music, whether it's beliefs, it's like there's nothing wrong. Like, some people are obviously born into situations where maybe they're agnostic, religious, whatever, but it's good to have a perspective. Like, it's good to have something, like, just like we're talking about, like Jordan Peele's movies, whether it's Cloud Nothings, it's good to have, like, a thing that makes you unique, and it's your perspective, it's your art, it's your craft, and then when you put it out there, people can feel that when they absorb it. Then you know what I mean?
I think that's really important. I think it's you have to sort of maybe not draw a line in the sand, but you have to stand for something and have some beliefs. And I get that. Yeah, a lot of people like. I just think that's very important, and I think that's more speaks too about selling out. Like, I know a lot of people that just sort of compromise their beliefs just because they think it'll get them Instagram followers or make a little bit of money in these short-term goals that they think is important. And I mean, and this is one thing that drives my wife crazy in sometimes, but I've turned down work from companies that I don't believe in, like, or, you know, on like an ideological or whatever, like, perspective. I'm like, I don't want to use my art to push this company forward or this product forward, so I'm not going to do it. And there's been times where there's been an issue where, like, we really don't have any money, and I'm just like, I can't do it.
Good for you, man.
You know, and I think you do sort of have to have that, you know, because otherwise, if you just put your hands up, it's like everything just goes to shit, and everyone just gets away with everything.
Yeah.
You know, you have to, and I think that goes back again to like the punk rock thing, is just having that ideal and being like, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, and this is what I want to do, and that's how I'm going to do it this way because that's the way I want to do it. And you have to be very grounded to be able to do that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, you definitely should stand for something. And that's another thing my wife and I talked about with religion, is that we don't go to any church right now, and she's very worried about the kids having a very loose structure. And she's like, you know, sometimes as the kids get older, if they're yearning to find something, it's easier for them to fall into these really closed-minded religious sects where it's all of a sudden it's like,
because they're craving the structure.
Because they're craving some structure and it's given to them, and then all of a sudden, and you see it where these kids come from these very open, liberal families where it's like, you know, and all of a sudden they become very conservative, or they become some sort of like
it's always like
Jehovah's Witness, or, you know, something. It's like a way to rebel, and it's like, I need this structure, and this is what's right and wrong, and you know. Yes, that's always.
It's a difficult thing to navigate.
It's a gamble. How do you?
Yeah, how do you do it? You don't know what you're going to get, and you can't. And no matter what, you can't control it. Like, you can't. No. You could be the best parent ever. You can't control your kids, like, with their decisions, their temperaments, who they are. Ultimately, like, they're going to figure it out. So, like,
and religion's tricky. And I have this thing where I just do not like to be told what to do.
Yeah,
you know. And me too. I have a hard problem with authorities. Anytime we go somewhere, people are saying you have to do this, you have to do it this way, and I'm always just like, nah. Like, that's.
Thank God you work for yourself, too.
Yeah, I have to. Like, I just dig my heels in. It's really bad. It's really bad. I mean, it's a fault in a lot of ways, but that's one reason why we've never sat down and figured on a church.
Well, it's not a fault if you can acknowledge it, because, I mean, that's the point then where you can work within that space. There's a tension there, you know. It's only a fault when you just completely ignore it and you run rampant and you don't give a shit. And then that becomes chaotic.
I think that's the problem with a lot of people, is they're not honest enough with themselves. Like, you know, everyone's always so worried about what everyone else is doing, but I think you need to spend time with yourself and look and be like, okay, this is where my faults are. I know what what I'm good at, what I'm bad at. I know my patterns, and just try to figure out a way to sort of make that work and work on your weaknesses and build off your strengths or whatever, right? Yeah. But yeah, it's tricky, man.
Yeah, and it's tough for people too because you just kind of you work within the context you've been given. Like this is something I always I try to talk about it all the time. And for me personally, I feel like a very extremely privileged person to have kind of grown up the way I grew up. Because I didn't grow up. My family wasn't rich growing up, but they were. It was like a middle class or getting into middle class kind of progressively as I got older. And it wasn't just that, but it's just I just had a good family. Like really good family, like really good friends growing up. And this is something I know a lot of people aren't lucky enough to grow up with. And it's this weird thing because like for me as an adult now, when I look at my developmental years, and I can obviously point to trauma, I can point to things that went terribly wrong and all that stuff like we all can. But at the same time, like comparatively speaking, when I look back on all of it, like it's a very, very privileged, very lucky upbringing. So when I talk about this type of stuff with a lot of people, that I notice there's a disconnect for a lot of them because by the time they're my age, like if maybe they grew up in really crappy, traumatic circumstances, they weren't given the framework or like the ability really to then like because like childhood's like a launch pad, you know. It's like depending on how you're raised and like the environment you were raised in, like that can in a lot of ways like set you up for the rest of your life. Like what kind of like stable or unstable upbringing you had. And it's obviously there's exceptions to that, but like I think as a general rule that's true. So I mean, like for me personally, it's always weird talking about it with people because even as an adult now, it's like when I think about what my opportunities are and like what like the bills I have to pay and all that and how like me and my friends talk about this because I work for a company and like the company has clients and I don't choose those clients.
Right.
I like you're in a situation where it's great. You get to like turn down like certain work or you get to pick certain work. Like I'm in a situation where like someone throws a client at me, I have to work with it. And that's become over time like a very compromising thing for me, especially as my beliefs change. Because like
we talked a little about that with the Steakum things before.
Yeah.
About like, you know, like working like, you know, is that something that you whether you eat that or not.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Do I want
like,
to represent this company?
Right, and how that works. Yeah, oh yeah, it's tricky.
It's tricky,
for sure.
man.
Yeah.
Because it's like I work for a company. There's a bottom line, and like I've had this happen a bunch of times actually through that account where I've said something along the lines of like, well, I'm just doing my job. If I didn't do this, someone else would be doing this job. And I've had people be like, you know who else said that, Steakum? The Nazis.
That's always right. The villain, yeah.
I mean, I get it.
That's such the most cliche thing everyone says. You know, the Nazis.
I'm sure a lot of it's in satire anyway, but it is. I mean,
Pontius Pilate was just doing his job too.
I get it, but at the same time, it's one of these things where it's like people are put in circumstances, situations contextually, and they don't always have options. It's like there's certain people I know that work in certain industries I know they don't want to work in, but they have to work in them. They don't have other opportunities, and it's like what ultimately, like we're in the economy we're in the world that we're in. Like we have to do what we can with what we're given, and I want to always be striving to do the best that I can with that. But it's always a morally contentious thing, I think, for most people.
Right.
You know, it's
tricky because the way you feel about things changes over times, you know, and then you know, you might think you feel one way really strongly about something, and then something will come along and change your perspective, or maybe you don't really understand what that was about. And so for years you were against that, and then you're like, oh, why was I doing that? Like I just didn't understand it, right? Because and everyone now is afraid to grow because everyone says everything's so black and white. This is this way, this is this way, you know. But no one's like, you really have to just. It really just I think just comes down to empathy for other people, you know. And I always say like people growing up, you know, everyone has like everyone goes through their levels of trauma and things that were bad. Like no one's had a perfect life growing up. Even people that you idealize, you look at and you think this person has a perfect childhood, they've got stuff that messes with their head.
Absolutely.
Something happened. And even people that had these really horrible backgrounds, they had good things that happened too. You know, it just depends on. Like I have people now that I talk to, and their problems to me seem so minimal, but they talk about them like they're the biggest thing in the world, you know, and you're like, oh, I couldn't do this today, and it's, you know, people everywhere you go nowadays, everyone just talks about how busy they are, you know. Now, if I talk to my mom, she's like, I'm so busy, I had to go to breakfast with my friends saying tomorrow I got a doctor's appointment, and she spent the rest 9 hours of the day playing video games because that's what she does because she's retired, right? She's like, I'm so busy right now. And that's like her perspective of where she is now. But other people are like, I'm dealing with my kid. Other friends might be, I'm dealing with my kid who's in the hospital, and I'm trying to work at night and doing all this stuff and bills, and they're saying they're super busy. So it all depends, like, of the perspective of
it's
the
relative.
person. And not like one or the other's, more or less. Like, there's no point really keeping a scorecard. But I think that's how it is with people, growing up. And everyone's so into just telling their own story. And you say, like, this is what it was. Like, are you saying, when I was growing up, it was great. I had a great childhood, a great experience. People will sometimes come at you and, like, discount that and be like, well, when I was growing up, it wasn't like that. And
I know.
You're so privileged,
absolutely.
this and that. And I'm like, so what?
Yeah, it's like, well, it's like
what
do we do with that then? Like,
what do you do? Like,
what do we do with that? Yeah.
Where are you now? Do you know what I mean? Like, you can only use your past as either a lifting point or as an excuse for so long. Like, you got to make something of yourself, And I know it's hard for people, man. I don't know. People just shouldn't be so judgy toward other people. I'm just like, just do your thing, man, and get it done. Like, don't even worry about what I'm doing. If I'm not doing you any harm, this person's not doing any harm. Let them do that, man. Don't tell other people how to live.
Yeah, this area specifically, I think, is where I wish and I hope and I think that most people that are interested in politics are moving slowly but surely away over time. I'm hoping away from, like, personal identity type criticisms in this area to systemic ones, like this whole topic, particularly like the topic of like comparing people's privileges or childhoods or circumstances, whatever that might be. I think right now it feels like there's a lot of tension because, like, people, again, social media, people were able to finally speak. Like I might voice my opinion on a certain topic and someone else could come in and say, you only have that opinion because you're middle class or you're a man or you're working in this industry, whatever it might be. And I think that is slowly going to start to change as more and more people start to understand that, like, the underlying problems that we're trying to get at when we do that are systemic. Like, they're not individual. Like I caused no personal harm. Like whether this is a thing that the government should fix or maybe past generations screwed up or whatever it might be. Like these are things that they should be talking about and they should be addressed, but people oftentimes they misdirect their anger or their, like, thirst for justice because maybe they're looking at a stat and they're saying, like, this X percent of this population is born into poverty. Like, I think I don't know what the stats are exactly. I'm pretty sure it's something like only people that are born into poverty today, just in general in America, I think only 6% get out or something like that. So like, you would take a stat like that and say poverty is a huge issue. And then, like, there's certain people who would always point to that 6% and say, like, oh, well, those people, like, here's an example of someone who, like, came from this ghetto, then they became super successful. And you can be like, yeah, that's really great. I want to, like, praise that. I want to acknowledge that. I also want to acknowledge that there's a systemic issue here that we need to address. And I'm hoping that people start shifting there.
People in those communities that if you do get out, you're, like, vilified for escaping and you're leaving. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like it's a tough thing to navigate.
Yeah.
And yeah, man. I mean, but everyone's limited by their own perspective, right? I mean, like, so you only know what you've experienced, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, everything else is just sort of, like, subjective. You think you know what someone else went through, but you don't really know.
Exactly.
So even if someone accuses me of something, I'm like, well, you didn't really go through it. You can't walk in my shoes, and I can't walk in your shoes. Let's just try to understand each other as much as possible, and just try to be cool with each other. I think what you're saying is totally valid. The systemic stuff is a whole different thing.
Yeah.
And the playing field definitely needs to, at some point, be leveled. And how do you get that? But again, I always think it's divide and conquer,
Yeah, that's what they want, yeah.
Everybody wants. I always say it's like, the dark men, the they. But that is what it is. I mean, everyone just wants everyone to be fighting and arguing. That's all we're doing right now. It's just like, how much stuff in the media even is like a distraction tactic, You see it all the time where some big news story about the environment or something important will break, and then all of a sudden they'll throw this other thing out that you're like,
what the hell?
That's total just, Trump said something that got everyone upset, and everyone's like, freaked out about that. And you're like, yeah, but what about this, man? This is like the real story.
Yeah.
It's all just distraction stuff. But yeah, man. I mean, people aren't easy.
Complex.
People are complex.
Yeah.
I say that to people with kids all the time. Like, the problem with kids is that they're people.
Yeah.
You know, they're
Little
not gonna do what you want them to do, and other people aren't gonna do. Like, oh, you're upset because people aren't acting the way that you want them to. I mean, your dog's not acting the way you want them to. You know what I mean?
Like, welcome to life.
You know, people tell me all the time, like, how much they love their pets more than love people, and it's like, yeah, but it's not the same thing. Like, yeah, your dog would run up to you and love you, and you know, you don't have to put up, you have to put up the effort. It's like different. You don't have to invest as much into it.
Right. It's not a two-way street as much.
No, it's like it's not a different. It's just different. You know, it's tough, man.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, and I don't think these problems will ever be solved. You know, in the grand scheme of things, I don't think there is any chance of a utopia because we all don't have the same idea of what a utopia would even be.
Right. We're all seeing the world through a different lens.
Right. And
I'm currently working on this article. I've been working on it for over a month at this point. Hopefully, maybe by the time this podcast is out, it'll already be out. It's just like something on Medium, like a personal project I'm doing, and it's over 10,000 words right now. And I've just been doing so much research, like going to hundreds and hundreds of different sources, and not just going to them, but for as many of them as I can, I'm trying to like spend some time like understanding like some of the, whether it's a news site, whether it's like a blog or a podcast or a YouTube show. And I'm trying to organize, because like over the years, I've been really into politics specifically. And over the years, I've kind of surfed in and out of different camps, and like, and you know, and usually what I do is when I get into one, I take it to the bottom. Like I try really hard to listen to as much, absorb as much, like get into what's going on here, and then I kind of like dip out, and like not dip out completely because you take parts of it, but you know what I mean. And with this, I'm really trying. It's an attempt. It's obviously, like you said, there's never going to be like a nirvana or whatever at the end of the tunnel. But it's an attempt to categorize and organize the different most influential political subgroups from like extreme left to extreme right, and kind of provide some like contextual history on like how the two major parties have split since like World War II. And there's so much history there that I didn't know before researching it. It's such like it's an interesting topic because like up until like post World War II until now, really, like there's been so much. Like you saw like the explosion of radio, the explosion of news television, and then the explosion of 24-hour news and the internet. Yeah. And there's so much history that you can really like follow the breadcrumb trail to like figure out how the two major parties have not only divided, but how like within each of them there's all these like subgroups kind of like working against each other and also working with each other. And I think today, especially because of the internet, like there's just so much more ability for people like even a group like anarchists or like socialists or libertarians, whatever you might be. There's all these groups that like prior to the internet would have been just fringe ideologies, and now with the internet they can all organize, they come together, and like they're growing.
You've got people to encourage your thinking and saying like, oh, I'm not like,
So it's everything from like conspiracy theories to like whatever.
I mean, I think flat Earth is the perfect example of that.
No, it is. Like it started as a joke, and then
it took off. I mean, the fact that people are even debating that, to me, is just insane.
Yeah, it's become a real thing.
Like people really, and I've had discussions with people, and people get very vehement about it. Like, no, you don't understand. You're just upset because you're questioning your own reality, man. You can't handle it. And what it gets is really it plays into people's egos because they want to believe that they're smarter than everybody else. I know something that no one else will believe, because they're just not smart enough, and I'm special because I believe in the flat Earth.
That is it. It's like I know something that no one else knows.
You don't get. Yeah, you're not turned on. You don't get it, man. Like the Earth is flat, but you can give them a million reasons why. Like to me, the round Earth theory makes sense. And you know what? I've been in an airplane. You go high enough, you can see the curvature.
They're like, nah, dude, that's like the magnet or the curve of your lens and your camera created it or whatever.
And to me, I'm just like, what does it matter? What if you did prove the world was flat? What if it was flat?
Yeah.
What's that going to make a difference in day-to-day life?
Yeah, they think it's this like this deep state government new world order. Like that's the other thing too of the conspiracy theorists is like that them as a subgroup. They're kind of dangerous because there's ones that are just innocent, like Bigfoot, or you mentioned earlier, what was the conspiracy we were talking about? There's a lot of innocuous ones. You know what I mean? And they're fine. But then, like with the political ones nowadays, with the internet,
deep state, and the government,
the deep state, and like it's almost always like the Jews are controlling the media, and it's like you get into some like really not just
racist, but like really just deeply disturbing views about humanity.
Right, that
and
plays into people's fears and everything else.
Yeah,
you know,
it's bizarre.
You're
man.
the victim. Everyone's out for you in the deep state, and then after a while, it's like, well, come on, man.
What do you do?
You just gotta you don't have any control over any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And if you think you do, you don't. You're one little speck of dust in the grand scheme of the universe. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can only control so much.
Carl Sagan.
Worry about what you can do. It's like, I don't know. I got in an argument with someone the other day, and I felt bad about it, but they were talking about space travel and stuff, and life on other planets, and I was like, it doesn't matter. Like, the stars you see in the sky, most of them are already gone.
Right. Or like millions of light years behind.
Because the millions, we're seeing like stuff that's already passed. Who knows what's going on right now?
Yeah.
A million light years present time. We won't know that for another million years.
Yeah.
And even if you could travel that fast, you have to travel past the speed of time. And we start talking about physics, and they're like, I don't know about physics. And I'm like, well, I know, but I started watching those like PBS shows. You ever seen that? There's one called Space and Time where they talk about heady like physics and about like atoms being in superpositions and like, oh yeah, when you're not looking at an atom, it's not there, it's somewhere else. And you turn around, you recognize all that kind of
subatomic
stuff.
Particles,
infinite universe, and like this whole the new black hole stuff and all this stuff. It's like, whew. Once you get into all that stuff, you realize like not much really matters at the end of the day.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, no one really knows what is going on, and I totally believe that we are still like a complete primitive species. And 1,000 years from now, people will look back on us and be like, dude, those guys were a bunch of idiots.
Yeah.
Just like we look back on people 1,000 years ago and be like, they put leeches on their body to suck the blood, or whatever they did, like, ha, they thought the world was flat. Ha, this is all just a game. No one knows. I don't even know if the rules keep changing as time goes on. Like, who knows?
Well, that's the best part about like the people who are typically on the ground level of any research, like the people that are studying subatomic particles. They'll be the first to be like, "Yeah, we don't know.
No one knows.
We don't know what's going on." So it's just hilarious how like there are people who are watching these like YouTube channels, like, "I figured it out. Like, I have solved the mystery."
The fact I think you really, the more you learn, the less the more you realize you don't know.
Yeah.
No one really knows anything.
That's wisdom. Yeah.
And I think that's good. It's like, because when you admit you don't know something, then the answers, everything is open to you. You don't have a closed mind. You can like learn something and like see what else is out there. But all these people that just close off and be like, this is the way it is. Everyone just wants to have control over something in their life and safety. And it just really comes from, if you get down to like a fear of death, no one wants to feel like they're going to die. They feel like they have control over something, know what's going on. They want to face the fact that eventually you're not going to be here and everything you love isn't going to be here. But that's really just not the case. That's just going against nature. That's just going to happen. Once you accept that, you're like, okay, you can relax a little bit and be like, hey, let's just make the best of it and let's go. Yeah. Maybe not stockpile your shit with guns. Because you're going to die eventually. I'm going to die eventually. Let's just take care of each other and have a good time.
Yeah. Have you ever followed do you know who Jonathan Haidt is? He's a social psychologist. I think he's based out of New York University, I want to say. But he's done a lot of great work over the past decade or so on the psychological differences in temperament between people who gravitate toward conservatism or liberalism as a whole. And it's so interesting because it's like, it's stuff that you almost already know. It's like, it's great because it's like your biases are almost reaffirmed by the research that he's done. And you find out in his research that it's like people that gravitate toward conservatism or have that temperament as a whole, it's like they're much more prone to value security and family and tradition and all these things that just are, it's like common sense. We know this, right? And then liberals much more prone to they're high in openness, they're high in new experiences and possibility. And once you start to parse out the psychological differences between people who are already predisposed to believe a certain way, then you can start to actually have an open mind to figure out how to communicate differences between them. Because there's a certain point where we're all we've been kind of harping on this, we're all on a team ultimately. We all have an identity that we identify with a group or maybe multiple groups, and that's fine. But when it comes to actually bridging the divide between any one, an individual person or a group or whatever, it's we have to at least understand where they're coming from. Why is this person prone to being a doomsday prepper? What is going on in their psychology that they long for this? And obviously, they long for that security. Like you said, they want to control their circumstances to a degree. And I think once we can kind of sort through that and figure out what makes somebody tick, then you can really get into good conversations. And you're not going to change people in a lot of cases, but you can understand them to work with them within reason. And obviously people people on both sides of the spectrum. Like if everything was liberal, I guess, controlled, everything would be loose, everything would be open, there'd be chaos, like, all over the world. If everything was like the far end of conservatism controlled, everything would be closed off. We'd be like way too, like.
And it's funny because people think like it has to be one of those two extremes.
Yeah, exactly.
And you bring up something, and you're like, well, that's socialist. Well, not everything has to be socialist, but maybe some things about socialism works. Maybe some things about.
And people's idea of socialism is so different.
It's so different. It's like it just there's more. It doesn't have to be like one concrete ideology, but people want everything like cut and dry.
Yeah, they want their sound bites. Yeah, it's just like I want to know that I want to know that socialism is bad, that capitalism is good. I want to know that like conservatives are good, that liberals are bad, whatever it might be. Like it's just.
And it's funny too because I noticed that it changes as you get older because people I know who are younger and who were poor and had nothing, and they were completely liberal. And then once they get married, they start making money. And they got nice car, and then they're like so conservative now. They're voting based on the stock market. I'm like, what happened to you, man? Like, well, I got a family now, and I got to do this, and you forget
taxes,
the other man.
Bro.
I'm like, I get it, man. But dude, you were like, come on, Molotov cocktail, let's get it. No.
Yeah.
But I always think, in my perspective, there's two emotions. You have love and you have fear. Like the opposite of love, I think, is fear, because hate comes directly from fear of what you don't understand. The ultimate fear is the fear of death because no one wants to know how to what comes after, you know, and that drives everything negative. It's just this fear of what's going to happen. So you can either approach things from a perspective of love or approach things from fear, and I think that's sort of the way that you have to sort of take it, but that's hard for people to swallow. No one wants to confront their own fears. Yeah,
because fear is real. I mean, a lot of times that like the fear of death, it's a warranted fear, like fear of the other, or like there's certain situations.
Is the ultimate fear.
Yeah.
But it's the one that no one's going to ever escape. And really, that's man's whole quest in anything in life is just to try to figure out a way to escape death. And we're getting close to the part where everyone's getting like, it's going to be the problem because everyone's living longer. You figure out a way to get over. Problems with pregnancy. People can have kids later.
Right.
Everyone's living older. Population overcrowded. The resources are going to be gone because it's selfishness, because no one wants to die. And I get that. I'm not saying I'm going to be the one that's going to jump, volunteer, die, but at some point, like, for things to work naturally, like a tree has to die so another tree can come up, right?
Yeah.
No one wants... Humans are just like, no, we're going to, do whatever we can to stay here forever. And that goes against the natural order of things, so it's a problem.
Dude, one of the first podcasts I did was with this guy Zoltan Istvan, and he is a transhumanist.
Is that his real name?
Yeah, and he's I don't know what his ethnicity or where he was from, but he his whole thing was transhumanism is literally he wants to put all the world's resources into becoming immortal, basically. That's his whole ideology. It's
but
it's wild.
And that's the tricky thing is let's say you are immortal. How boring is that?
Yeah, right.
Do you know what I mean? And as a human being, I think that's everyone's existential struggle is how do you deal with that? You're faced with the fear of dying, but the other side is the factor of being immortal. I mean, that's the whole vampire thing, right? That's why people are obsessed with it.
Yeah, it's old as time.
The idea of living forever is just as bad as the idea of dying.
Yep.
They're neither option is good.
Yeah.
But you better just get used to the fact that, at some point, you're going to die and whatever your beliefs are, hang on to them. It's going to happen, But, you hear that all the time. Everyone's talking about living forever and putting their stuff in computers and all that stuff.
For decades, there's always this new.
Yeah. I was like, whatever. Good luck with that, man.
There's a great quote. You watch Game of Thrones?
No, everyone tells me I need to watch it, man.
Dude, I'll be one of those people. You gotta watch it. I was one of those people. My coworker has been for years trying to get me to watch it, and I'd always be like, dude.
I haven't watched it because I don't want to get hooked. That's
and you will.
And I know I will, and it's wrapping up, and I'm like,
now's your time because once the season's over, you can just binge the whole thing. But
people
in your own time.
With Stranger Things, you need to watch Stranger Things. You're gonna love it. And I'm like, everyone tells it. Then I watched the first episode. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so tailored to my generation.
Right? Yeah,
and
the nostalgia.
I'm just like, okay, I got totally sucked in. So that's why I'm like,
you'll get sucked in. Game of Thrones, if you're into the fantasy genre, I mean, it's unbeatable. It's phenomenal. But there's a great quote by the one character, Beric. I forget his last name. It's Dundarian or something like that. And he's talking to this other character about death and how that's the ultimate. He says death is the ultimate enemy. And then the other guy was like, well, yeah, like death always wins though. Like, what's going on? He's like, yeah,
Yeah.
the enemy always wins, but like you have to keep every day, like you got to get
keep
up,
fighting. You got to get up and keep going. Like, that is the ultimate thing. You just got to keep going. And I think like just sort of realizing that it sort of takes a little bit of a pressure off if you're like,
yeah,
well,
absolutely.
It all doesn't matter because eventually we're all going to die.
And we're all going to die.
You can do whatever you want. Then you can do whatever you want. Do you know what I mean? It's good. Like just take a little bit of the pressure off, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like some people need the pressure. Some people need to let off the gas. It's like if you're like maybe you're a little too anxious about dying, you're just caught up in existentialism. It's like let your foot off the gas. So maybe you're someone who's just like reckless and like not giving a shit about life. It's like maybe
no, that's bad.
But maybe you should be thinking a little bit more about the finite nature of life.
Get what you can out of it. You know, just don't let it so many people. I heard a quote recently. They said the problem with people is like riding a bike in life is that if you're too tense on the bike and you fall off, right? You know, when you're trying to learn a bike, you're so worried about how to steer and stuff. Yeah. You're thinking out everything and like you just can't ride the bike well. If you just loosen up and enjoy the ride, hold on loosely and enjoy the ride, you'll get much more out of it. And it is the same thing with life. You have to just sort of like loosen up a little bit, enjoy the ride, realize that a lot of things just out of your hands, man. You know, like. I just try to just go with it as much as possible. And that sort of circles back into my work again. It's like people ask, like, are you nervous about not having a full-time job and working on your own and everything? I'm like, well, yeah, but
of course, yeah.
Nothing is guaranteed. So I might as well do what I want to do and try to get done as much and put myself out there and make something, you know? Because I saw like a lot of my peers, and I've had friends that were in bands that sort of like blew up, and I watched other people go on and have all the success. Then you just realize, like, yeah, well, they did it. Yeah. Like, I can do it. You know, I remember, you know the band Dr. Dog, right?
Yeah, of course.
Well, those guys used to be in this band called Raccoon, and we used to play shows with them in Westchester.
No way.
In Westchester, when I was in this band, The Situation, I remember one night we're hanging out at Rex's at Westchester, and I'm sitting there with, the main dudes like Toby and Scott. And we're there. Everyone had a bunch of drink, and we're close out night. And they're like, "Oh, your band's so good." And I'm like, "Oh, I love your band. You guys are great." And they're like, "Well, no, you got to hear this other band we have, man. Dr. Dog. It's amazing with these Beach Boys harmonies and Beatles things." They're telling me about it, and the whole time I'm sitting there looking at them, thinking like, "Dr. Dog. That's the worst name I ever heard for a band." There's no way in hell they're going to make anything with a name like Dr. Dog. I'm just looking at them like, like you boys are tripping. I think I said to them, like, you guys need to stick with this Raccoon thing. Forget that Dr. Dog nonsense. It ain't working. Go. And then sure enough, like, our band broke up and I watched them like
eat your words.
Like blow up. And I'm like, damn. Like, but you know, at the time it was like, Dr. Dog, what are you talking about, man?
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
And same thing, like I watched tons of different bands. Like, you ever heard that band, A Place to Bury Strangers? Like this big popular noise band. We used to play shows with them in places, and there'd be no one there, and they were just super loud, Jesus and Mary Chain, noisy thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, no one's gonna get into this. No one can even stay in the room for this.
Yeah.
And they blew up, and they're playing Coachella. And I'm like, oh man, sometimes you just don't.
It's unpredictable.
It's unpredictable.
Yeah.
But it's funny. But so you just gotta just keep going at it, you know.
Well, that's what's so cool about like how you're back into your music now. You know, it's like it's like you're an adult, you've got kids, you're an artist full time on your own, and you're still like, I want to get out, I want to do this, I'm doing it for me. You know, it's such a cool.
And it's funny because when I was younger, I didn't write any songs. Like I wrote the music for all the songs, for all the bands I was in, except for The Situation. I wrote like music. I never wrote lyrics because when I tried to write lyrics, I just thought they were horrible. And then after The Situation broke up and I started a new band, I was looking for a front man. I figured I just couldn't find anyone. So my wife actually got me a guitar when my first daughter was born, and she said, you know, bought me an acoustic. She's like, here, I want you to be able to play for the kid to help him go to sleep. And so then I started just singing and realizing like, okay, I can actually like sing. Maybe I can write songs. Then trying to figure out how to write songs. And I think, and learning more about like the process of songwriting, how hard it is. I think you're given like this myth at some point when you start writing songs, like this Bob Dylan myth, where like, dude, he wrote that song in 10 minutes, man. You know what I mean? You're like, well, I can't write a song in 10 minutes. It comes out as garbage. Look. And then later I started reading stuff about like Nick Cave, and how Nick Cave, when he's writing an album, has like a work day. He's like, I go into work at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I start writing, and I don't leave until 6 o'clock. I do that 6 days a week, and it's a job, and I go in there and I work on songs.
Yeah, even if you're not inspired, even if you're tired, you just go.
You just try to work.
Yeah, you just go.
And you write a lot of garbage, and then something good will come out of that. And then I read about Leonard Cohen, And he's like, oh, it took me 7 years or whatever, 5 years to write Hallelujah. And he just kept working on it and working on it, scrapping stuff. And I was like, oh, well, the secret to this is not like some divine inspiration coming in. You can put in the work and make it work. And so that's sort of been the thing. Like, you just got to, it's like any artwork. You got to, like, I always say with songwriting, usually when I write a song, like, the melody will come first, the chords will come. But as far as the lyrics, like, the lyrics are all like throwaway at the beginning, right? And I think it's like, I say it's like becoming acquainted with someone. It's all small talk at the beginning. You're like, hey, how's the weather? What's going on? And you keep like working on trying to write words. So eventually you figure out where it's going to go and what the song is going to be about, you know? And so then I just realized you just got to really just put in the time. But so I don't think like where I am now, I don't think I could have gotten there younger. You know what I mean? Like I needed all this, whatever perspective happened before, I needed that to be able to do what I'm doing now. And now it's great because singing in the band has just been so rewarding. And it's weird because people are like, oh, man, you're such a good singer. I love your voice. And I'm like, I'd never heard that before in my life. I never thought I was a singer. You know, so it's like, it's just encouraging and being able to like, you know, get at people at that sort of level is just cool. It's like a whole different beast than just playing guitar in a band and rocking out on stage. Now I got like a lot more in my shoulders.
Part of your soul's like it's like a different part of you.
But you can sort of connect to people in different ways. And I really love that and trying to get like the crowd sort of into it and stuff. Yeah, man, it's cool.
You're the maestro.
Sort of. Yeah, I'm the mighty maestro. And but you know, like I wouldn't have learned that if I had stopped. Right? And that's what I try to tell people is like, if it doesn't matter, like, don't worry about the end goal. Just keep progressing. And then who knows where that will lead you to. Right. You know, I would have never thought I was fronting my own band or anything like that. And now that's sort of how it has evolved. Like everything else just sort of evolved like that. And we've had like this band there's something going on with this band. I don't know what it is, but we've had good success and people just come up and they're like, dude, you guys are...
It's a great sound.
Are killing it.
It's fun.
And it's like connecting with people for whatever reason. I'm just like, okay, well, let's just keep doing it, you know. And so that's awesome. That's we got that Squirrel Nut Zippers gig, and everyone's excited about that.
So I couldn't believe that when I saw it. I love that, man. That's so good.
It's funny because like I when they offered it to us, I haven't followed them that much in years, and I was like, I saw them in the '90s, and
right?
stuff.
Like they're still a band,
and I was like, oh, Squirrel Nut Zippers? Like, are people going to be into that, or is it like kind of corny, you know? And then I remember going to Adam, I was like, yeah, we're opening up for like Squirrel Nut Zippers, and he's like, dude, that's awesome. Like Jimbo and he's going off about his solo albums. I'm like, oh, well, that's cool. And
I think they kind of made like a little bit of like a resurgence. Yeah.
I mean, I always liked them, but I'm like, oh, well, this is cool, you know. So I'm excited, and people are excited about the show. And that's another thing. It's like such a dumb thing. It's like all of a sudden people give you validation because you're opening up for that band. Now it's like, oh, well, your band must be good because you're opening for the Squirrel Nut Zippers. I call it the New York theory. Like, you could be a band from around here, but then once you play New York, you can go to New York and play for 2 people. Anyone can really do it. You go up there and you play some club and you're playing in front of 2 people. But you come back and people are like, dude, you played in New York? Yeah. Oh, they must be good, man. They played in New York.
That's it.
You know, they don't really know the story behind it, whether there's anyone there or not, but it's like, they must be good.
Well, it goes back to you doing like the commission posters for big bands. It's like, it's not like a big pain thing, but it's like, it's clout. Like, these are the things that give you clout.
And it's funny what people take as being like, you know, this, and I don't know, like, I get emails a lot from people in different parts of the world, and they're just like, wow, what's it like to be making it as an artist, and you're doing all this stuff, and I understand that people's perspective of me is different from what's the reality of what I'm,
totally.
They're seeing it, and a lot of they're seeing it through the lens that I put out there, you know, because no one's going to put out there that they're not a success.
Of course.
You're trying to put your best
your
self,
personal
you put yourself
brand
out there, you know? And I mean, you know, you think that as you work on things as an artist, and you go and you think like, oh, if I can just get, like I remember thinking, if I can just get myself in like a comprehensive art book, things are going to be different.
That's it.
And
That's the thing.
I remember getting in that book and just being like, I'm in it. I did it now. And nothing really changes. You know, and then the next thing happens, and you're like, nothing really changes.
Yeah.
It's just still you and the work. So no matter what you think are like these great goals and these great achievements you're going to get, as you get to them, you just realize it doesn't matter, and the work is just what matters. People's perspectives might change a little bit, but you just got to keep going forward. That's all there is. You just got to keep making more work and just keep making more music and just keep moving forward.
I can even think on a local level, like when I started playing songs, it was like the first
first, I was like, oh, all I want to do is play like a Philly gig. That was it.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like, oh,
yeah.
you get booked at a Philly gig. It's like, oh, that was cool. But then it's just like a normal thing after a few
then you
months.
start playing.
And then it's like, oh, I want to get booked at this bigger venue. But then it's like, I want to get booked at this radio station. You kind of like, as you accomplish these small things, like you said, yeah, it's not, you realize that there's always going to be something that you're comparing yourself to, no matter how high you get on the scale.
Yeah.
And I think it's the work is the thing. Like you said, you never stopped working. That's like a really just a solid point to always drill home to people. Like whenever kids, because kids specific, I mean, they reach out to me personally all the time too, but like really on the stake of my God, I get DMs from kids all the time.
I see you reposting sometimes on like, the Instagram stories and stuff. And I'm like, dude, I'm glad I'm not getting this kind of traction.
Well, yeah. So I post the funny trolling, trolling shit.
Jeez, man.
But dude, and I show my wife sometimes.
Yeah.
Like I try to keep people's stuff private from the DMs, but like a lot of kids, specifically in like high school, have reached out to me. That'll be like, whether it's like specifically social media management geared, they'll be like, I want to like manage a brand, or I want to get into being like an influencer, or YouTube, whatever it might be. Like, what do I do? Or I'm going to college next year. I have no idea what to do. Like, how do I figure this out?
Yeah.
And it's like the thing I always go back to when I tell people or give people advice on this type of thing. It's like, just do something. Like, no matter where you are right now, you could be picking up a budget guitar for $50. You could be blogging on your own. You could start writing. You could do a podcast. You don't need a mic. You can literally do it on your phone at this point.
Yeah.
You could be calling people up. When I started this podcast, I literally started just emailing and reaching out to random people online to be like, would you want to talk to me? And so many of them, like people who have way bigger platforms than me, we're just like, sure. I'll do it. Like, you just have to do it. Like, that's the thing. Putting in the work is like, that's the bottom line. I mean, like, you're not going to it's not like putting in the work equals you're going to make it. It's just putting in the work is what's going to not just give you the diligence and give you the character as like to build an identity, but it's going to provide you some value and provide the world value then. Like, if you think yourself and your work is valuable, then obviously that value is going to be put out into the world in some way, and hopefully it's positive. I mean, it's not always positive, but that's the goal at least. You want to give people incentive to actually do something so they become something, and then that's the hope. Because so many people are just they whether it's the grandiose, like you used the word fantasy before, whether it's like the fantasy of like
people just
success.
They're more worried about being famous.
They don't even
that's
care. The case a lot.
They don't even care what they're famous for. They just want to be known for something. And to me, that's just such a backwards thing. Because if you get famous doing something that you hate, like that's a prison, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you don't like getting there, then you're stuck. Then you back yourself in the corner. You're well known for doing something, and you're successful doing something you hate. You don't even worry about that. To me, and I've said this to my wife, like I don't necessarily want to be like fame on a gigantic level. Is to me is scary. Where you can't
it's a nightmare.
Where you can't leave the house and everybody's in your business. No.
Yeah.
Like cult hero, I'm all for it. You know what I mean? Making a living and being like successful to a certain level. I don't need that, Brad Pitt, George Clooney thing. You know what I mean? Or Rihanna, any of that Jay-Z. Nah. I'll go with the Leonard Cohen route or whatever. Nick Cave, like sign some autographs at the airport or something. It'd be cool to be able to go out to a restaurant or movie and not be like completely hassled by everybody.
Well, and you're a great example too of success as you get older, because it's like I think people, again, younger kids specifically, like you grow up as a teen and you're watching gamers on YouTube, or you're following some influencer on Instagram, and you're seeing success, and you want that success, and you want it to be immediate, and people don't realize that like most times, not in every case, because there are like your child stars and all that, but most times that success comes from decades of putting the time and the energy and the blood, sweat, and tears into it, and it's a slow progress up,
and like honing your craft and stuff. And I think too, you were speaking about young artists always coming up, and there's always like new ones coming up, and they're young. And I say to people all the time, it's like with collage art or any art, making your first paintings, making your first pieces of art are the easiest.
Yeah.
You start making collages, you can knock out tons of them. As you start going, then you start doing stuff. You're like, I'm repeating myself. This looks like this.
Yeah.
What else do I want to say? I've said anything. It's like songwriting. You write your first couple songs, it could be about anything. And as you keep going, it just gets harder and harder.
Yep.
Because
how do I be different? Yeah.
How do I keep evolving? And that's the thing is like, even as you get older, you see less and less artists your age. You know, so if you can just keep rising, it's like people just fall off the ladder because of other things in life. You know, they have demands of kids, demands of money, demands of whatever, and just the tediousness of just constantly working on something for really virtually no reward. Do you know what I mean? Like you got to love what you're doing and have sort of pride in your work to keep doing it over and over and over years, because other than that, like, you're just not going to get much out of it, you know?
Yeah.
It's
it really is about falling in love with the work. I mean, that seems to be the recurring theme here.
And that's why I look at a lot of artists, guys like Leonard Cohen, who really over years just kept getting better and better and blossoming, in like a Nick Cave or like, you know, a Neil Young or Bob Dylan. These guys did great work as they got older. You know, that's just sort of against the narrative that's given to you that like everything is done when you're young and you're fresh. But to me, it's that's sort of like old news. Like, I'm more interested in the people that were able to continue and go into, like, even, you know, Picasso or any of these artists that lived for a long time and kept working to the end and kept pushing themselves. Whether their work when they were older was as good as their work when they were younger, notwithstanding, they kept trying to do something.
Right.
And hitting stuff. David Bowie, you know what I mean? Like, everyone talk about how great his last album was before he passed, and just keep pushing it and just doing the work, no matter how you fall in and out of the popular favor. You know, Lou Reed, same kind of thing. Like, those kind of guys I find, especially as you get older, like, inspiring. You can just sort of look at the people who went ahead, you know, and just be like, yeah, that's sort of what I want to go, and just keep evolving and just keep pushing.
Yeah.
Because as you get older, everyone's going to tell you to stop. Even when I started this band, like, someone came up to me and said, well, you're starting a band, like, what do you expect to get out of it? You know, it's like, and they look at you.
Success
they look at
measuring
you like,
stick.
what, do you think you're going to be a rock star or what? And I'm like, well, when you go to your basketball game on Thursday with your basketball league, do you think you're going to join the NBA?
Yeah.
No. Well, I'm doing it because I love doing it, you know, and that's why you should do it. Don't tell me otherwise.
And that's like, and again, it's like, that's how you become a fulfilled, decent, you know, member of society. Yeah. It's like, the older you get, I mean, that's just, people get more miserable. They get more closed off to new experiences. They get more, you know, just tight with their life as finances become more important, as family becomes more important. The older you get, and, you know, when you fall in love with your work, I mean, this is like, that's the biggest, I think, part of my dad that I look up to on like a practical level. It's just he loves working. Like, he says it all the time. He's like, I don't want to retire. Like, I just want to keep working because I love what I do. And he's always trying new things. He's one of these guys who, like, later in life, he started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at 41, I want to say, or maybe at 45 he started, and he became a black belt by like 53. Like, he's one of these guys that's just like, I think he was like 9 years, 10 years he did it, which is crazy. And it's like, in the like we're saying, like, the sort of normalized society, people be like, why are you starting this at that age? Like, you're gonna get your ass kicked. Like,
you
what's
have to
the point?
rebel against your own laziness. You know? Like, everyone I know who's grown up and lived in like their 90s or whatever, had really fruitful lives. They were always like looking for something new, and they had that hunger to live. You had to sort of fight that idea of like getting old. Like, settling down is like the worst phrase you can use for people. That's something people say to kids. Settle down now. You're too, you know, like, no, don't settle down. Like, you know, just keep going out there and have that sort of hunger for life and learning new things. Like, you just got to keep doing that. And I think that's awesome. I mean, your dad doing that, you got to just keep pushing, you know?
Yeah, you have to.
You have to never stop growing, because the opposite of growing is dying, right? I mean, that's again, a nature thing, you know?
Yeah.
Trees keep growing until they're dead. So you just got to keep sort of evolving and stay flexible, you know? It all comes back, you know what I mean? It all comes back to nature, man.
It always does.
I say that's the whole thing with this whole environment discussions. Everyone keeps talking about the environment. And I say, you should just say our environment. Like, our environmental problems is we are destroying our own habitat.
Yeah.
Like, and we can keep going, and we'll die, and the planet Earth is still going to be here.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, we just won't be here.
It doesn't care.
It doesn't care. Everything else, like the atoms universe is going to keep going, whether we're part of it in this form or another form. Like, we're just killing ourselves, man.
Yeah.
Like, you can fool yourself, but you're nothing but dirt. You're going to die. And you're no better than me, because when you die, the worms aren't going to eat your body quicker than they eat mine. You ain't going to taste no better than I am.
We're all equal in the dirt. Yeah.
You know what I mean? To the appetite of the worm, we are all equal.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? So, like, get off your high horse, man. Like, come on.
I love it, man. Do you got? We can wind it down, man. This has been great. It's a great conversation.
Going on for a long time. Nah, it's been awesome.
It's great. Do you have anything currently? I know you got the Squirrel Nut Zipper show coming up. But
Squirrel Nut Zippers at the Ardmore Music Hall on Thursday, April 25th.
Right.
In Philly.
You got other projects coming up or anything you're working on?
I do. I did a album cover and a poster for. Do you know who Madeline Gauze is? She's like a pretty well-known Philadelphia musician. She has her new album coming out, and the release for that is April 20th. But I did the album cover with her with a photo by this guy Bob Sweeney, who's this awesome video director.
Yeah.
He did a photo for the front. I did the album design, and that's coming up. I got a collage piece I did recently for the magazine, The Baffler.
Okay.
For one of the articles that comes out in May. It's like the second piece I've done with them. I got some pieces in a show in Rochester right now at the Rochester Contemporary Art Space. It's part of a group show called Cut and Paste. I'm going to be in another group show at a gallery I work with in Washington, D.C. Called the Latela Art Gallery. They do a yearly collage show. I've been a part of that this is my 4th year involved with them. They represent my artwork down there. I think that show opens in either September or October. I don't remember the exact date. But yeah, people can check my website, mightyjoecastro.com.
Yeah,
I'm on
Instagram,
Mighty Joe Castro. Yeah.
Do you got copies of the book left? Twitter. You still selling these?
I do got copies of the book. I'm down to probably the last box and a half or something like that. But
congrats, man. That's awesome.
Thanks, man.
It's such a beautiful book.
Thank you, man. It was a labor of love for sure.
And you did the whole thing.
I designed the whole thing.
It's so crazy. It's so well put together. It's very professional.
And part of the reason for the book, too, is that, I included in there interviews that I did over the years that sort of tie into, because, I do a lot of these, I don't like to say them interviews because really they're questionnaires. Like people send you a list of questions and you type them in, you answer them. And it's really easy to make yourself sound cool because you've had 2 weeks to work on it and edit out anything,
Of course, yeah.
But, those things, you put them out in line and they sort of just disappear over time. So I had all these interviews I did and I worked hard on. I'm like, well, I'll just do this retrospective book. I'll put in the interviews and then I'll sort of show the growth of my thought process in the interviews as time changes. That. Give something in there and just sort of encompass what I've been doing in the last 10 years. And also just really the book too is just show people I've been doing this for a while now, and there's a lot of new collage artists come up and sometimes I see people and they're doing my style, you know what I mean? They're getting a lot of success and you're it's all good, but just remember I've been doing this for a while, man, and so this is sort of a testament, hey, this is 10 years, little sort of time capsule.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important to sort of look back. And I really hit a point where I wanted to start doing something different with the artwork. And I hit a wall, and I'm like, well, maybe I should look back. And that's when the idea came up for the book. Put together this book, clean slate, boom, put that aside. Now I'll figure out what I'm going to do next and how to sort of attack things.
That is literally how I think. That's the book that I'm working on. It's the same thing. And this article I mentioned, the political subgroups, I literally, when I get down a path of work and thoughts and opinions and all that, it's I need to organize it. I need to put it into some form, and then I can move on. You know what I mean? It's you can't, it's with an album, it's when you produce the album, you put it out, it's now I can move on.
Now I can move on.
Yeah.
And never listen to it again. Or maybe 10 or 20 years listen to it and be when you can listen to it with nostalgia, not critical thinking.
Right.
Yeah. But I think that's important. You just get it and you move on, and then it's what's the next thing? You got to sort of clean your plate off to bring in more food and eat more.
Yeah.
Or whatever. But that's sort of what that book is, and I'm proud of it, and people have seemed, I've sold copies of it as far away as Australia and Europe and all over the United States.
It's amazing.
Which is flattering. Because honestly, shipping overseas, the shipping is almost as much as the book.
Right, yeah.
And I feel bad because people are I want to buy it, but the shipping's so much. And I'm I can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
I'll try to ship it as cheap as I can, as securely as I can. But, man, the response so far has been good. And, it's awesome that people care about it. And hopefully I'll sell the last few copies. If people want it, you can get it through my website. MightyJoeCastro.com. You can go to the Gravamen.com. Has all the information about the band and where we're playing. We're doing some shows in May in Cleveland and Ohio, as well as we got some more New York shows coming up and stuff like that. Hopefully we're going to record again soon, because we put out our 4-song EP and our 7-inch.
Yeah.
This last fall, but I want to do a full length at some point. So we're trying to figure that out and trying to get down to writing the songs for that and just just keep moving forward.
Rockstar, man. Rockstar, mighty Joe Castro.
Work star.
What? Right.
Work star.
What a testament, man. Like lifetime of work, man. So, that's good shit.
Thank you, man. Thank you. It's nice.
Yeah.
It's just trying, man. That's people say like, "Oh, you're doing it's so great to see you doing all these things, the beer and this and everything." I'm like, I'm just hustling, man.
Yeah,
I'm
it's just
trying,
work.
I'm
It's
just
just
trying
work.
to make it. I'm just treading water. I mean, really, it's like that's the great thing about not having a full-time gig, is like you have the freedom to fail. You know what I mean? Like you have the freedom to drown and starve.
Yeah.
People say you have so much freedom, so much time. It's like, yeah, you can drown, man.
Yeah.
You can.
There's no safety net
There's
here.
no safety net. Like you better go do that. And that is again a good motivating factor.
Yeah.
Helps keep you on your toes.
Absolutely, man. Well, dude, thanks so much again for all the time.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome that you're doing this. I dig the podcast. I've listened to a bunch of them.
Get out of here.
I have.
That's awesome,
I
man.
did. I checked them out. Yeah,
That's crazy.
I wouldn't agree to be on here without listening to them first.
Make sure it's no gotcha
Make sure
questions.
it's good.
Or
You get here and be like, wait a second, what is this? Some kind of white power
It's a
podcast?
trap.
What is this? You know what I mean? What's really good?
Oh my God! Can you
I gotta do a look.
I think about that all the time.
You
though,
never
like,
know. All of a sudden, you show up, be like, someone asked you to do something.
Yeah,
you show up,
that
and
ain't
you're like, wait, what am I
what did I
supporting
do?
here? No, wait, what? No, I'm not down with this.
Dude,
You know
it's
what
so
I mean?
true. You have to vet. Like, you really do, man.
You just gotta be smart with what you support. But I mean, we know each other a little bit, and we've crossed paths and
Absolutely.
stuff, and I've
Good people find good people.
Yeah,
That's what I
man.
always say.
Yeah.
It's like, put good juju out there. You
Yeah.
get something back.
put good juju, get good juju. All right. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it sincerely.
It was my pleasure.
All right, later.